Chapter 286. Following the appearance of the 10 coffins at the foot of Pale Sword Sect's mountain, the atmosphere of the entire Central Plains suddenly became tense. What kind of faction was Pale Sword Sect? 1,000 years ago, it was an existence that suppressed the Realm Defense Alliance. Even now, it was one of the strongest factions in the entire Azure world. But now, someone had placed a coffin at the foot of Pale Sword Sect's mountain, and the person lying inside was a disciple of Pale Sword Sect. This method meant that they would not rest until one side was dead. Pale Sword Peak in the main hall. Chen Beihan's eyes were closed, not saying a word. Below him were Zhangxian and Yu Qi. After a moment, Chen Beihan suddenly said, "Tell the junior brothers to return. Also inform eldest senior brother." Eldest senior brother. Zhangxian hesitated for a moment, then said, Will he return? Zhangxian smiled. He definitely will. Zhangxian nodded, then turned and left. After Zhangxian left, Chen Beihan looked at Yu Qi. "What do you think?" Yu Qi shook her head. "You decide." Saying so, she turned and left. Inside the hall, Chen Beihan shook his head with a smile. Cloud Sword Peak. Yi Xian sat at the entrance of the main hall. He had already heard about what happened in Pale Sword Sect, and now he was waiting for Yu Qi. Soon, Yu Qi appeared at the entrance, glancing at Yi Xian. Yi Xian stood up. "Master Yu, I have heard about what happened outside, so I have decided to leave and not implicate Pale Sword Sect." Yu Qi shook her head. "You cannot leave." Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Yu Qi looked at him. "If you leave now, the world will think that my Pale Sword Sect is afraid of the Realm Defense Alliance. To my Pale Sword Sect, this is more serious than sect annihilation. Even if you want to leave, you cannot leave now. Moreover, as a disciple of Pale Sword Sect, you should stay and face the sect." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "If I don't leave, the Realm Defense Alliance will not let this matter rest." Yu Qi walked in front of Yi Xian. She lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. "With or without you, this battle will be fought. You're just an opportunity to start a war." With that, she entered the inner hall. Yi Xian was silent where he was. At first, he thought that the Realm Defense Alliance was only targeting him, and that was definitely not wrong. But the one who was wrong was the Blue Sword Sect. Maybe the Blue Sword Sect had already been preparing to make a move, because he was very sure that the Grey Sword Sect would not start a war with the Realm Protection Alliance, just for him. Unless he, Yi Xian, was now a sword immortal, so monstrous that the Pale Sword Sect could sacrifice everything to protect him. And the reason why Blue Sword Sect kept him in the sect, was it really because they didn't want outsiders to think that Blue Sword Sect was afraid of the Realm Protection Alliance? There must be some other reason. After a short moment, Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about this. Since the Azure Sword Sect wanted him to stay, then he would stay. Cultivate. Yi Xian turned around and walked towards the back of the mountain. For him now, the most important thing was to cultivate and strengthen himself. He was now at the true 10,000 Dharma realm, and he could break through to the Dharma defensive realm. Moreover, in terms of Sword Dao, if there was a chance, he could also improve it. Sword Immortal. Once he became a Sword Immortal, it would be completely different. At that time, he could fight with Supreme Lord Lu. Yi Xian came to the back of the mountain and sat cross-legged on the ground. His right palm opened, and a sword quietly appeared. But soon, the sword suddenly disappeared, and in the surrounding space, swords suddenly appeared. It was extremely strange. Instant Space Sword. His current Instant Space Sword could release at least 100 swords in an instant. Moreover, he could appear and disappear unpredictably. Cultivate. Cultivate like crazy. And the next afternoon, there were 10 more coffins in front of the Blue Sword Sect. Inside the coffins, there were still Blue Sword Sect disciples. However, in front of these 10 coffins, there were 10 more corpses. Among them, 2 or 3 were Dharma Defensive Realm experts. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Besides them, the others were all at the Myriad Dharma realm. And these people weren't from the Blue Sword Sect. They were from the Realm Defense Alliance. After they found out that they were from the Realm Defense Alliance, the entire Central Plains was instantly seething with excitement. The Realm Defense Alliance and Blue Sword Sect were fighting it out? Regardless of the reason, everyone only knew that Dao Yi was a little suspicious, and that meant that things were getting more and more complicated. 5 days later, over 30 coffins had been piled up at the foot of Blue Sword Sect's mountain, but there were dozens of corpses in front of them. Both sides were secretly competing. On this day, a young man suddenly arrived at the foot of Blue Sword Sect's mountain. The young man wore black clothes, his long hair draped over his shoulders, and he wore a pair of linen shoes. The young man glanced at the coffins and corpses on the ground, and then he looked up at the top of the mountain. Blue Sword Sect's younger generation, come at me! Come at me! As soon as these words were spoken, the entire Blue Sword Sect was in an uproar. It didn't take long for countless swordsmen to flash down from the top of the mountain. However, a voice suddenly resounded from the top of the mountain. Stand down! As soon as this voice resounded, a sword suddenly tore through the sky and descended firmly in front of the young man. The young man wore a cloud-colored robe, and he held a sheathed sword in his hand. It's senior brother Nangong! Someone exclaimed with surprise. Amongst the younger generation of the Blue Sword Sect, there were 2 people who were the most outstanding. The first was Shangyu, and the second was Nangong. The world called them the 2 Swords of Blue Mountain. Nangong glanced at the young man and said, "Who are you?" The young man spoke indifferently. "Either you die or I die. Is there any need to know my name?" As soon as he finished speaking, a spear suddenly appeared in his right hand. In the next moment, he charged forward swiftly, and the spear in his hand was like a dragon emerging from the sea, as it headed straight for Nangong. Nangong's face was expressionless. Suddenly he waved his right hand. In an instant numerous glowing swords appeared around him. These glowing swords instantly engulfed the spear. At this moment, the figure of a ferocious beast suddenly flashed out from the man's spear. Immediately after, the roar of a wild beast resounded throughout the entire Tsang Mountain. Bang! The countless shadows of swords instantly dispersed, and Nangong himself had already retreated 300 m back. As soon as Nangong stopped moving, he suddenly pressed the sword against the space between his eyebrows, and his left hand's fingers were pressed together horizontally at the tip of the sword. After a moment of silence, he suddenly pointed at the young man, and the sword in his hand shot out like a bolt of lightning. The sword was extremely swift, and it was so swift that one could only see a faint line. The young man in front of Nangong was expressionless. Suddenly, the spear in his hand smashed forward, and the roar of a raging beast resounded from within the spear. Bang! This smash forcefully stopped Nangong's flying sword, and then the young man's right hand suddenly spun once more. Bang! Nangong's flying sword was instantly blasted away. At the same time, the young man with the spear in his hand was like a cheetah as he charged towards Nangong, who stood nearby. It was like a bolt of lightning. There was a trace of seriousness in Nangong's eyes. He suddenly formed a sword seal with both hands, and then an illusory sword appeared above his head. In the next moment, he suddenly slashed forward with both hands, and the illusory sword instantly slashed down. A heaven-rank sword technique. Meanwhile, the young man suddenly struck with his spear, and his spear was like a thunderclap that traversed the heavens and the earth. Bang! Under the gazes of countless people, Nangong's illusory sword was instantly shattered into pieces, and then Nangong was directly blasted flying. The Spear Emperor. Countless people in the surroundings were stunned. This young man is actually a Spear Emperor? After he blasted Nangong flying with a single strike, the young man didn't stop, and he swiftly tossed the spear in his hand at Nangong. Hiss! The spear was like a bolt of lightning that flew straight towards Nangong. Nangong's pupils constricted. He suddenly pressed his palms together, and then a sword silently condensed between his palms. In the next moment, he suddenly slashed forward with both hands. Break! Break! Follow! This chapter isn't finished. Please continue to the next page. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword between his hands suddenly slashed down fiercely. Bang! A deafening explosion suddenly resounded, and then a powerful force suddenly erupted in front of Nangong. In an instant, Nangong's entire body was instantly blasted hundreds of meters away. Just when he was about to hit the ground, a hand suddenly caught him. Everyone looked at the owner of that hand. Yi Xian. It was Yi Xian. Everyone was instantly stunned when they saw Yi Xian. It's him again. Everyone was definitely familiar with Yi Xian, because not too long ago, Yi Xian had personally annihilated an expert who'd come to challenge the Firmament Sword sect. Nangong glanced at Yi Xian. And Yi? Yi Xian nodded lightly, and then he withdrew a violet source pill for Nangong to consume. I'll do it. Nangong nodded lightly. He's very strong. Be careful. Yi Xian nodded, and then he walked towards the young man in plain clothes. The young man glanced at Yi Xian, and then he gestured with his right hand, and the spear flew into his grasp. I thought you wouldn't show yourself. Yi Xian smiled. I'm your target, so how could I possibly not show myself? The young man nodded lightly. Come, let me see how strong the youngest sword emperor of our firmament world is. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly stomped his spear on the ground. Bang! The entire ground instantly collapsed, and then a powerful force suddenly converged towards him. This force grew stronger and stronger until it was like a storm, and it caused everyone here to feel suffocated. Yi Xian spoke softly. As you wish. As he spoke, he tapped his right foot lightly against the ground, and his figure seemed like a dragonfly that was skimming the surface of water as he leaped up into the air. In the next moment, he'd arrived above the young man's head, and then he slashed his sword down. A single strike to decide life and death. This time he didn't hold back at all. This attack hadn't just been enhanced by the force of the Sword Emperor. It was even enhanced by the evil intent sword intent. The expressions of everyone here instantly changed as soon as this attack appeared. What sword technique is that? Meanwhile, a wisp of a ferocious smile arose on the corners of the young man's mouth, and then he stabbed his spear upwards. Pierced the heavens and the earth. This attack seemed like it could pierce the heavens and the earth, and it was unstoppable. The sword and spear collided under the gazes of countless people. Bang! A world-shaking explosion resounded, and then two figures were blasted flying. However, right at the instant that Yi Xian's figure was blasted flying, he suddenly released his grip. In the next moment, the young man's expression instantly changed drastically, and a sword had pierced through the center of his forehead before he could even react. He'd lost. Countless disciples of the Pale Sword sect cheered when they witnessed this scene. He'd won. He'd won again. When countless disciples of the Pale Sword sect looked at Yi Xian, their gazes were filled with fervor and respect. Respect that came from the bottom of their hearts. After Yi Xian descended to the ground, he wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth, and then he looked up into the sky. The Realm Defense Alliance. From this moment onward, I, Yi Xian, will leave the Pale Sword sect. If there's anything then. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the peak of the mountain. From this moment onward, and you will be one of the candidates for the next sect master of my Pale Sword sect. Yi Xian was stunned when he heard this. The Pale Sword sect didn't want him to leave. Right at this moment, an icy cold voice suddenly resounded from afar. The Pale Sword sect is harboring a sinner of the firmament world, and the entire world can punish them. Yi Xian raised his middle finger into the sky. Old man Lu, let's fight one-on-one. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. Challenging Lord Lu? Right at this moment, Lord Lu suddenly appeared in the sky. He looked down at Yi Xian. Are you sure? He really appeared. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said seriously, You believe that? I'm just playing with you. Everyone was speechless. End of this chapter. Chapter 287. After speaking, Yi Xian turned around and left without the slightest hesitation. Seeing this scene, Lord Lu's expression changed. He glanced coldly at Pale Sword sect, then turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Whereas at the scene, all the Blue Sword sect's disciples' hearts were heavy. Realm Defense Alliance. The influence of this force in Azure World was too great. And now, Pale Sword sect was actually going against Realm Defense Alliance. It would be a lie to say that they weren't worried. However, if they were afraid, they really weren't. Swordsman. A swordsman that could stay in Pale Sword sect wasn't an ordinary swordsman. And swordsmen were usually the most fearless. At this moment, someone suddenly said, Senior brother and Yi seems to be Sword Emperor? As soon as this was said, The hall suddenly became silent. The appearance of Lord Liu had almost made them forget that Yi Xian had displayed the power of Sword Emperor, Cloud Sword Peak, inside the main hall. A middle-aged man stood in front of Yi Xian. The person who came was Pale Sword Sect Master, Chen Beihan. Chen Beihan smiled. You want to leave Pale Sword Sect? Yi Xian nodded. In my opinion, this matter is ultimately my own matter. And I came to Pale Sword Sect to learn the Imperial Sword Technique. Of course, not only did I learn the Imperial Sword Technique, I also learned many other sword techniques. Chen Beihan said. Do you think that you have implicated Pale Sword Sect? Yi Xian was silent. In fact, now, he suddenly discovered that the matter had become slightly complicated. His intuition told him that Pale Sword Sect had other plans. Chen Beihan smiled. Remember, at this moment, you are in Yi, not Yi Xian. You are a disciple of my Pale Sword Sect, not the Dean of Blue Waves Academy. As he spoke, he lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. You can go to the Sword Tomb to take a look. There might be a pleasant surprise. After speaking, he turned around and left the main hall. The Sword Tomb? Yi Xian thought about it, and finally decided to take a look. After all, it was free. Before long, Yi Xian arrived at the Azure Sword Sect's Sword Tomb. The Sword Catacomb was located on a lone mountain peak. To be precise, it was located in the belly of the mountain. At the entrance, an old man was lying down with a sword in his arms. The old man was sleeping soundly. Yi Xian bowed slightly to the old man and said, I came to the Sword Catacomb under the order of the sect master to find a surprise. The old man did not reply. Shrugging his shoulders, Yi Xian walked straight into the building. Sword intent. The moment he walked into the Sword Catacomb, he felt a strong sword essence. It wasn't just one sword essence, but countless sword essences. It was boundless like a vast ocean. Yi Xian's expression was somewhat solemn as he continued forward. Soon he discovered many swords. There were many swords stuck in the ground, and the sword intents were emitted from these swords. Many. Very, very many. Moreover, the grade was not low. Among them, heaven-rank swords could be seen everywhere. Foundation. Yi Xian once again witnessed the powerful foundation of these ancient forces. Although he himself was quite rich, compared to these ancient forces, he was simply a beggar. Yi Xian continued forward. Soon, he arrived at the depths of the Sword Catacomb. In the depths of the Sword Catacomb, he found several heaven-rank swords. He also discovered that the higher the grade of the sword, the stronger the sword essence contained in the sword. Come to think of it, these were the remnant sword essences left behind by the owners of these swords when they were alive. Seeing this, Yi Xian suddenly felt a little emotional. If he died one day, he was afraid that only a wisp of his sword essence would be left for future generations to see. Yi Xian shook his head and waved away the negative thoughts in his mind. He continued forward, but after 2 steps, he suddenly froze. What am I looking for? As if thinking of something, he glanced around. There were so many swords containing sword essence. If he were to devour them, the weakest would be at the law-controlling realm. Devour? Yi Xian was a little hesitant. They didn't ask him to devour them. It wasn't a good idea to start devouring like this. But the problem was that they didn't ask him not to devour. Thinking of this, Yi Xian instantly felt relieved. Then, he picked up a sword beside him and stabbed it into his chest. Boom! In an instant, a powerful aura swept out from his body. Not only that, but his evil sword essence also spread out at this moment. How could one sword be enough? So, Yi Xian picked up another sword and stabbed it into his chest. In this way, in a short period of time, Yi Xian had stabbed nearly 30 swords, among which, there was even a heaven-rank sword naturally. The noise he made in the Sword Catacomb was not small. Soon the old man outside was awakened. He hurriedly entered the Sword Catacomb. When he saw Yi Xian, he was stunned. What are you doing? Yi Xian did not answer, and continued to devour. The old man's expression changed. He was about to stop him, but he seemed to have thought of something and stopped. If he stopped him at this time, it was very likely that it would cause Yi Xian to bite back. The old man hesitated for a moment, and then his figure shook. He directly went to Ashinsward Peak, and found the sect master Chen Beihan. After a moment, Chen Beihan frowned slightly. He's devouring swords? The old man nodded. Chen Beihan said in a deep voice, "Let's go and see." After saying that, the two directly disappeared from the hall. After a while, they arrived at the sword catacomb. When they saw Yi Xian pick up a heaven-rank sword and stab it into his chest, the corners of their mouths could not help but twitch. Was this guy crazy? The old man said in a deep voice, "Should we stop him?" Chen Beihan glanced at Yi Xian and shook his head. His aura is undergoing a qualitative change. He may be about to break through. The old man frowned. Using this method to break through? Chen Beihan took a deep look at Yi Xian. He's a little special. Special? The old man smiled bitterly. It was the first time he had seen someone devour swords to improve themselves. Just like that, after about half an hour, the aura that emanated from Yi Xian's body had become strong to a very terrifying level. This was no longer the aura of a true Dharma realm expert. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly picked up another sword and stabbed it into his chest. Seeing this scene, the old man and Chen Beihan's faces twitched again. Although there were many swords here, they were all accumulated over countless years. Fortunately, after Yi Xian devoured the last sword, he did not take another sword, and the aura that emanated from his body was still slowly strengthening. Just like that, under the gazes of the old man and Chen Beihan, about half an hour later, boom, a powerful pressure suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. Phew! Yi Xian exhaled a mouthful of foul air. Law Manipulation Realm. After devouring 3 heaven-rank swords and countless true-rank swords, he had finally reached the Law Manipulation Realm. Easy. At this moment, Yi Xian felt extremely relaxed. Not only that, he also felt that there was an extremely powerful force within his body. Law Manipulation Realm. Now his overall strength had at least increased by a lot. And now, he was not afraid of Law Manipulation Realm experts at all. At this moment, he had a kind of invincible belief. I am invincible. Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but laugh loudly. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Is there something wrong with your head? Hearing the old man's words, Yi Xian came back to his senses. He looked at the old man and Chen Beihan. He was stunned. And then he hurriedly walked to Chen Beihan and bowed slightly. Greetings, sect leader. Greetings, senior. Chen Beihan glanced at Yi Xian. You devoured the swords? Yi Xian's expression froze. But he quickly returned to normal. In any case, the swords had been devoured. He grinned. Yes, my cultivation technique is special. I need to devour the swords to improve myself. Chen Beihan stared at him. You devoured a lot of swords. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. No, I couldn't control it. At this moment, Chen Beihan suddenly smiled. Don't be nervous. I don't mean to blame you. Law Manipulation Realm. You need to stabilize your realm and familiarize yourself with this realm. Understand? Yi Xian quickly nodded. Understood. Chen Beihan nodded slightly, then turned around and left. But after taking 2 steps he stopped again. I didn't ask you to come here to devour the swords. There are countless remnant sword intents here. If you properly feel their sword intents, you will have many unexpected gains. After that, he walked out of the sword catacomb. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Stop devouring. After that he turned around and left. On the spot, Yi Xian also shook his head with a smile. In fact, he had no other choice. If he wanted to prepare his own sword, his current financial resources were not enough. In fact, it was far from enough. For example, if he wanted to reach the true Law Manipulation Realm, he would need at least a heaven-grade sword. A heaven-grade sword was no longer of any use to him now. It was worth mentioning that after devouring so many swords, his Heaven's Thunder sword had reached the heaven-grade upper grade. The sword had risen by a grade, but its power had increased by more than a little. Now he was completely capable of fighting a true Law Manipulation Realm expert. However, he still wouldn't be careless, because there were strong and weak true Law Manipulation Realm experts, especially people like Yu Qi. Although Yu Qi was also in the true Law Manipulation Realm, she was still a sword immortal. A true Law Manipulation Realm and a sword immortal were 2 completely different concepts. A person's strength could not be measured by realm alone. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian continued forward. Along the way, he saw another heaven-grade sword, and it was a very special kind. But he didn't take it. As a person, one shouldn't be too greedy, because those who were too greedy would usually not have a good ending. After walking for an unknown period of time, Yi Xian stopped, because he sensed that the sword intent in this position was the densest. Not far in front of him, there was a long sword stabbed into the ground. The sword was 4 feet long, slender, and shrouded in cold light. The sword exuded an illusory sword intent, which made him feel like he was floating in the clouds. It was a very strange feeling. In addition to this sword intent, there were many other sword intents in the surroundings. These sword intents permeated the surroundings and didn't disperse. Each sword intent represented a swordsman, and also a type of sword Dao. This was because everyone had a different understanding of sword Dao. 1,000 people, 1,000 sword Daos. Inside the sword catacomb, feeling the sword intents around him, Yi Xian gradually entered a meditative state. At this moment, he was feeling the sword Daos of these different swordsmen, using the sword Daos of others to prove his own sword Dao. P.S. Happy New Year everyone. 3 chapters today. Leave me a Happy New Year too. This request is not too much. Chapter 288. Inside the sword tomb, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, like an old monk in meditation. Outside the sword tomb, the old man was not sleeping, but staring intently at the sword tomb, afraid that Yi Xian would begin to devour swords again. Just like this, time passed bit by bit, until the second day, Yi Xian still did not come out. And at the foot of Pale Sword Sect's mountain, there would be a few coffins every day, but in front of the coffins, there would definitely be a few corpses. Pale Sword Sect and Realm Defense Alliance were still competing with each other. However, everyone knew that the real show had yet to begin. Now it was just the foreplay. On the third day, Yu Qi entered the sword tomb. Yu Qi walked in front of Yi Xian. She sized up Yi Xian. Do you know what a sword immortal is? Yi Xian shook his head. Yu Qi said softly, those who have their own sword Dao can be called a sword immortal. With that she turned and left. Inside the sword tomb, Yi Xian was stunned for a long time. Finally, he got up and walked towards the sword tomb's exit. After so many days he had sensed many people's sword intent, but in this cave, there were still very few sword immortals. And a sword immortal's sword intent was very different from an ordinary swordsman's sword intent. The biggest difference was that a sword immortal's sword intent already had their own Dao. What was one's own Dao? It meant that one had a new understanding of the sword Dao, and one had given a new life to the sword. And now he could not do that. He did not force himself, because this thing could not be forced. A sword immortal, before becoming a sword immortal, had to accumulate over a long period of time. This accumulation was not only about the sword Dao, but also about life. It was not that easy to become a sword immortal. This was the purpose of Yu Qi's visit. After Yi Xian left, he went to prepare a meal. Inside the hall he sat opposite Yu Qi. After a moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Master Yu, in our Pale Sword Sect, who is the best fighter? Yu Qi did not even think. Eldest senior brother. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Not the sect master? Yu Qi shook his head. Eldest senior brother is the best at fighting. Sect master is good at management, and sixth senior brother is the most talented, and has the greatest potential. What about you? Yi Xian suddenly asked. Yu Qi said indifferently, Why are you asking this? Yi Xian chuckled. I'm curious. Yu Qi shook his head. Since you're already a disciple of Blue Sword Sect, there's one thing you need to understand. Within the sect, you can have ambition, but you can't be unscrupulous. If you have the strength, you can sit in any position, but if you have any bad ideas, your life will be in danger. Yi Xian smiled and said, Don't worry, Master Yu. I don't have any thoughts about the position of Blue Sword Sect's sect master. Yu Qi nodded. I know, but others do. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. Don't worry, Master Yu. I'm not a person who likes to cause trouble. Yu Qi glanced at him. You are. Yi Xian. After the meal, Yu Qi walked into the inner hall while Yi Xian left Cloud Sword Peak and came to Weapon Forging Peak. Weapon Forging Peak, as the name suggested, was naturally a place for weapon forging. Any major force would have such a place for weapon forging. Naturally, Blue Sword Sect had won too. And this time, he was here to seek an audience with Weapon Forging Peak's Peak Master, Zhan Tai. Seeing Yi Xian's arrival, some Weapon Forging Peak disciples hurriedly bowed. Greetings, senior brethren. Yi Xian also returned the greetings. Soon, under the guidance of a Weapon Forging Peak disciple, he came to a great hall. That disciple cupped his fists towards Yi Xian. Senior brethren, Master is currently forging. Please wait for a moment. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Junior brother, go ahead. I'll wait here alone. That person nodded his head. Senior brother, if you need anything, just let me know. With that, he turned and left. Yi Xian sat on the chair and waited. About 2 hours later, a burly middle-aged man appeared in the great hall. The middle-aged man was extremely burly, especially his arms, which were like 2 huge pillars, filled with explosive power. Zhan Tai. This person in front of him was the Weapon Forging Peak's Peak Master. Zhan Tai took a look at Yi Xian. What's the matter? Yi Xian hurriedly stood up and bowed. Uncle Master Zhan, I'm here to ask Uncle Master to help me forge a heaven-grade sword case. Sword case? He also had a sword case, but it was only at true grade, and could not keep up with his current strength. He needed a heaven-grade sword case. Zhan Tai walked in front of Yi Xian. Do you know what a heaven-grade sword case means? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't. Zhan Tai replied calmly. At least 5 billion high-grade spirit stones, and this is only the cost of materials, manpower and earth vein fees. Adding everything up, to forge a heaven-grade spiritual relic, it would need at least 10 billion high-grade spirit stones. Moreover, high-grade spirit stones might not be of use. What we need are amethyst source crystals. A large amount of amethyst source crystals. Speaking of this, he stretched out his hand towards Yi Xian. Do you have it? 10 billion high-grade spirit stones. Yi Xian shook his head repeatedly. No. Zhan Tai took a look at Yi Xian. If you don't have money, what are you talking about? Saying that, he turned around and was about to leave, but very quickly, he stopped and turned back to look at Yi Xian. If you help me with something, I can forge a true grade sword case for you for free. What is it? Yi Xian hurriedly asked. Zhan Tai replied calmly. In Sky Cloud City's City Lord's house, there's a recovered treasure named 1,000 Weapon Cauldron. This is a top-grade heaven-grade treasure, specially used to forge spiritual relic. If you can retrieve this item, I can forge a sword case for you for free. Not only that, I can also forge a flying sword for you. A flying sword specially used for the sword case. Sky Cloud City. Yi Xian thought for a moment. Sure. Sky Cloud City. He had not forgotten about this city. This city's city lord Lu Feng and his son had once gone against Yi Ling. Zhan Tai replied calmly. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Sky Cloud City is filled with crouching tigers and dragons. This time, you might not be able to get out. Saying that, he turned around and left the main hall. As for Yi Xian, he also turned around and left. He directly left Firmament Sword Sect and headed straight towards Sky Cloud City. Of course, it was done secretly. He didn't want to attract too much attention now. 2 hours later, Yi Xian arrived at Sky Cloud City. Sky Cloud City could be said to be the Realm Defense Alliance's turf. This city would bring in huge profits to the Realm Defense Alliance every year. And in this city, there were other powerhouses, but they had to depend on the Realm Defense Alliance to make a living. Yi Xian made use of his chaotic chi to sneak into Sky Cloud City and arrived at the City Lord's residence. At this moment, the City Lord's residence was still heavily guarded. Occasionally, there would be strong practitioners sweeping through every corner with their divine senses. However, these divine senses were totally unable to discover his chaotic chi. Approximately 1 hour later, Yi Xian left the City Lord's residence. In a corner outside the City Lord's residence, Yi Xian's expression was gloomy, because he had searched the entire residence, but there was no clue at all. Only then did he realize that Lu Feng must have been carrying such a supreme treasure on him. In order to obtain that 1,000 Weapon Cauldron, he must first get rid of Lu Feng. And this Lu Feng was in the true 10,000 Laws realm. Assassination. These 2 words appeared in Yi Xian's mind. Without the slightest hesitation, he decisively chose assassination. Very quickly, Yi Xian sneaked into the city lord's residence again. Not long later, he found Lu Feng's residence, but there was no one inside. In the corner of the room, Yi Xian surveyed his surroundings. He was standing right in front of the door. As long as Lu Feng opened the door, he would be face to face with him. His right hand gripped tightly onto his sword. He didn't dare to release his sword intent and force, but he had to release all his sword intent and force the moment he made his move. He couldn't afford to be any slower. He had to kill him in one strike. Otherwise, he would be surrounded and attacked. In this city lord's residence, there were at least 3 true 10,000 Laws Realm practitioners. Once he was surrounded, it would be difficult for him to escape. Wait. What he had to do now was to wait. Just like that, Yi Xian didn't move at all, and stood behind the door like a statue. A night passed and Lu Feng still hadn't returned. On the other hand, Yi Xian was still standing there. On the second night, Lu Feng still didn't return, and Yi Xian didn't leave either. He continued to wait there. On the third day, on the fourth day, just like that on the fifth day, footsteps suddenly sounded from outside the door. Yi Xian still didn't move. The footsteps got closer and closer. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly felt his heartbeat quicken. Soon the footsteps reached the door. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the door. "Who are you? Why are you in my room?" Hearing this, Yi Xian's mind instantly went blank. I was discovered. How could I be discovered? In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through Yi Xian's mind. Soon, Yi Xian forced himself to calm down. Impossible. There was no way that Lu Feng could have discovered him. At this moment, the door suddenly opened. The person standing in front of the door was Lu Feng. Lu Feng stepped into the room. But in the next moment, as if he had sensed something, Lu Feng's expression changed drastically. He was about to pull back his foot when a sword suddenly slashed down from above his head. This sword had appeared without any warning. One sword to decide life and death. The moment Lu Feng stepped into the room, Yi Xian immediately executed one sword to decide life and death. At the same time, he released all of his sword chi and sword intent. To Lu Feng, this sword strike was too sudden and too terrifying. At this moment of life and death, Lu Feng instinctively raised his arms to block. The sword fell. Chi. Lu Feng's arms were instantly severed. As the sword fell, Lu Feng frantically retreated. However, it was his soul that was retreating, not his physical body. Chi. Yi Xian's sword slashed down, shattering Lu Feng's physical body in an instant. However, Lu Feng's soul retreated 10 zhang, dodging this fatal strike. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly dashed forward and stabbed out with his sword. One sword to fix the soul. This sword strike was specifically aimed at the soul. After losing his physical body, Lu Feng's strength had been greatly reduced. How could the current him block Yi Xian's sword strike that was specifically aimed at the soul? Sensing the terrifying power of this sword strike, Lu Feng was horrified. He instinctively wanted to flee, but Yi Xian's sword was faster. Chi. A sword pierced through Lu Feng's forehead, and Lu Feng's body immediately turned illusory. Yi Xian stopped. With a wave of his right hand, Lu Feng's storage ring flew into his hand. In the next instant, he disappeared from the spot like a ghost. At the moment he vanished, 2 old men suddenly appeared here. True Imperial Magic Realm cultivators. When they saw Lu Feng's shattered corpse on the ground, the 2 old men exchanged a glance. Then, their faces turned deathly pale. Chapter 289. Cold Sweat. Both of their foreheads were already dripping with cold sweat, because they had just heard a sword chime. But when they arrived, Lu Feng was already dead. And they had only heard the sword chime less than half a breath of time. Someone had killed Lu Feng in half a breath of time. Who killed Lu Feng? A sword chime. Without a doubt, it had to be the Blue Sword sect. The 2 elders hurriedly turned and left. Outside the city, Yi Xian arrived at a deserted place. After stopping, Yi Xian's face was full of excitement. Instant kill. He had just killed a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator. That was an instant kill. Before this, he had never imagined that he could kill a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator in an instant. Never. In the past, whenever he saw a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator, he would turn and run. But just now Yi Xian had killed a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator with 2 strikes. It would be a lie to say that he was not excited. However, after the excitement he had to calm down. He had assassinated a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator, not an instant kill. Thinking of this, the smile on Yi Xian's face slowly faded. If it was a head-on duel, he would definitely not be able to kill a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator so easily. Moreover, whether or not they could win was still a problem. A huge problem. After a moment, Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about this problem. In any case, he was no longer afraid of a true Imperial Magic Realm cultivator. Yi Xian hurriedly took out the storage ring. When he saw what was inside, Yi Xian was completely stunned. His hands were trembling, because inside the storage ring, there were almost 5 billion supreme-grade spirit stones. Apart from that, there was also a heaven-grade spirit weapon. It was a saber. The saber was about 4 feet long, slightly curved, and exuded a dark green glow. On the edge of the saber, there was a faint red glow. On the hilt of the saber, there were 2 conspicuous black words. Heaven Splitter. A heaven-grade treasure. Yi Xian grinned. This was a good saber. It was a pity that he did not use it. However, he could sell it or give it away in the future. After putting away the Heaven Splitter, Yi Xian continued to look through the storage ring. In addition to the heaven-grade saber, there were more than 1,000 purple origin crystals in the storage ring. Purple Genesis crystals and top-grade spirit stones could not be exchanged for each other, because purple Genesis crystals were too rare. Under normal circumstances, no one would be willing to exchange their purple Genesis crystals for top-grade spirit stones. Even those with top-grade spirit stones would not be willing to exchange them for purple Genesis crystals, because the ratio would be too high if they were to exchange them for one. It was not worth at all. Therefore, in the Azure world, the common currency for ordinary cultivators was the spirit stone, and for those who had reached the Imperial Law Realm and the true Imperial Law Realm, the common currency was the purple source crystal. If 1,000 purple origin crystals were to be exchanged for top-grade spirit stones, it wouldn't be a problem to exchange for 5 billion top-grade spirit stones. However, Yi Xian did not plan to exchange them, because purple origin crystals were exactly what he needed right now. After putting away the purple origin crystals, Yi Xian continued to look through the storage ring. In addition to the purple origin crystals, there were more than 100 treasures in the storage ring. They were all immortal herbs and spirit pills that were incomparably precious. In short, there was basically no trash in the storage ring. What a steal! Yi Xian was so excited that he jumped up and down. However, this was normal. Lu Feng was a city lord after all. His net worth was definitely not low. The only pity was that there was no 1,000-tool cauldron in the storage ring. There was no 1,000-tool cauldron. Yi Xian frowned. Could it be that War Iron's information was wrong? After a moment of silence, Yi Xian finally decided to make another trip to the city. If he had a heaven-grade sword case, his battle strength would definitely increase greatly. Flying swords were also his forte. But now, he lacked a good sword case. After Yi Xian stealthily entered the city, he once again snuck into the city lord's mansion. At this moment, the city lord's mansion was in a state of panic and chaos. The city lord had been silently killed. Who wouldn't be panicking? Although Lu Feng was dead, he still had a wife and son. At this moment, the person presiding over Lu Feng's funeral was his second son, Lu Qiao. In front of the mourning hall, Lu Qiao silently knelt, his thoughts unknown. At this moment, several people suddenly appeared in the mourning hall. The people who came were Emo Xiao of the Realm Defense Alliance. Emo Xiao walked to the front of the mourning hall. He glanced at the coffin and frowned deeply, instantly killing a true defensive magic realm expert. Could it be that the eldest senior brother of the Pale Sword sect has returned? Thinking of this, Emo Xiao's pupils suddenly shrank. In the next moment, he directly turned around and left. Soon, several people disappeared from the mourning hall. They left as quickly as they came. After Emo Xiao and the others left, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Lu Qiao. However, at this moment, he was wearing a gray robe, and his true appearance could not be seen. Seeing Yi Xian appear, Lu Qiao glanced at him, his face expressionless. Yi Xian was somewhat surprised. This person was quite calm. After a moment, Lu Qiao suddenly spoke. Who else do you want to kill? Yi Xian said indifferently. The myriad tool cauldron. I need this thing. Give it to me and I will leave. What if I don't? Lu Qiao asked. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Chi. One of Lu Qiao's arms directly flew off. Yi Xian grinned. I like tough bones like you. I will ask you one last time. Will you give it to me or not? Believe me, if your answer is not good, these will be your last words in this life. Lu Qiao stared at Yi Xian. Just as Yi Xian was about to attack, he suddenly said, In the cabinet. Yi Xian suddenly slashed down again. Chi. Another of Lu Qiao's arms flew off. Lu Qiao stared at Yi Xian. How do you know I'm lying? Yi Xian was taken aback. Then he asked, Are you lying? I don't know. I just casually slashed. Hearing this, Lu Qiao's expression instantly became ferocious. Yi Xian grinned. Do you want to live? If you do, then hand it over. Lu Qiao sneered. Even if I tell you, you won't let me live. Yi Xian suddenly said. It's on you. Hearing this, Lu Qiao was stunned. The next moment he hurriedly said, How could I keep such a divine item on me? Yi Xian smiled. Because it's a precious item, you will definitely keep it on you. Ah! Lu Qiao suddenly roared. Then a powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword. Bang! As soon as the sword descended, Lu Qiao's aura instantly vanished without a trace. At the same time, Lu Qiao's body was directly split into two. Blood and internal organs sprayed all over the ground. Yi Xian gestured with his right hand, and Lu Qiao's spatial ring instantly flew into his palm. He glanced at it, and there was an enormous cauldron over 6 m tall within the spatial ring. The myriad tool cauldron. Yi Xian put the spatial ring away, and was about to leave. Right at this moment, Mo Xiao, who'd left earlier, had suddenly appeared in front of him, and there were 4 true defense realm experts standing behind Mo Xiao. He'd left and returned. Mo Xiao stared at Yi Xian. May I know which peak master of the Pale Sword sect you are? Yi Xian sneered. What? You want to take revenge on me? Mo Xiao said indifferently. Reveal your true form, I. Right at this moment, the aura emanating from Yi Xian's body suddenly vanished without a trace. The expressions of Mo Xiao and the others instantly changed, because Yi Xian was still standing in front of them, but they could no longer sense Yi Xian. Mo Xiao stared fixedly at Yi Xian. It's you. Yi Xian slowly walked over to Mo Xiao. You never know how weak you are. As he finished speaking, he walked around Mo Xiao and walked towards the outside. Within the hall, Mo Xiao's expression changed. Suddenly, he fiercely turned around. Since your excellency is so formidable, then please enlighten me. Yi Xian's footsteps stopped. He slightly paused, and then said, Do you know why it's so difficult for you to advance even half an inch after you've reached the true defense realm? Mo Xiao, who was about to attack, hesitated for a moment, and then said, Why? Yi Xian said in a light voice, Because there's already a demon barrier in your heart. Mo Xiao was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said angrily, Shut up, when this lord is speaking, don't interrupt, understand? Mo Xiao glanced at Yi Xian, but didn't speak. Obviously, the temptation of breaking through to the true defense realm was too great. Yi Xian pondered for a moment, and then said, Actually, there's no other reason. It's mainly because you're stupid. Besides this, I really can't think of any other reason. As he finished speaking, Yi Xian broke into a run. Mo Xiao. Chapter 290. He ran away. Mo Xiao and the others stood dumbfounded on the spot. He actually ran away. They really didn't expect that Yi Xian would run away, because Yi Xian's appearance showed that he was a peerless expert. How could such a peerless expert run away? But the problem was, he really did run away. Mo Xiao and the others were stunned for almost 2 breaths of time. Then Mo Xiao's expression turned extremely ugly. Chase! Soon they disappeared on the spot. At this moment, he had already understood something. It was very likely that this peerless powerhouse from before was a wax man with a silver spear. I've been cheated. Thinking of this, Mo Xiu's complexion became even more unsightly. After living for so many years, he was actually toyed with like this. This was simply the greatest humiliation in one's life. In next to no time, Mo Xiu and the others chased out of the castellan's estate and arrived on the streets. However, when they arrived on the streets, their expressions instantly became slightly unsightly. Aura. When they chased someone, they relied on locking onto their aura. However, they were unable to lock onto Yi Xian at all. Therefore, after leaving the city lord's mansion and entering the vast crowd, they completely lost track of Yi Xian. If he wanted to catch up to Yi Xian, he had to keep his eyes on him. At the entrance of the city lord's mansion, Mo Xiu used his spiritual sense to sweep the surroundings. However, there was nothing. Gradually, his complexion became somewhat fierce. Since the other party fled, it meant that he was afraid. Fear proved that he wasn't the sword master of Songjia. If that wasn't the sword master of the Azure rank, then who could it be? How did he manage to conceal his aura? At the entrance of the city lord mansion, Mo Xiu had a gloomy face as he thought for a long time. Finally, he swept his eyes around once more. Let's go. After saying that, they disappeared on the spot. About a quarter of an hour after they disappeared, a man walked out from behind the gates of the city lord mansion. It was Yi Xian. In fact, he didn't even try to escape just now. He did not dare to escape, because once he left the city, he would be too conspicuous if he fled, and Mo Xiu and the others would definitely be able to notice him. Therefore, he decisively chose not to run, and stayed right in front of Mo Xiu and the others. Chaos Chi. At this moment, Yi Xian thought of the Chaos Chi. This Chaos Chi was simply too terrifying. The effects of the chaotic Chi were definitely not limited to this. They would slowly develop it in the future. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it as his figure shuddered, and he left the city lord's residence. He didn't stay in Sky Cloud City, but returned to Blue Sword Sect. Weapon Forging Peak. Zhan Tai stared at the multitude tool cauldron for a long time. Finally, he looked at Yi Xian and said, "You killed him." Yi Xian nodded. "Kill them." Zhan Tai nodded slightly. "Follow me." After saying that, he walked out. Yi Xian hurriedly followed. Heaven-ranked sword case. Just thinking about it made him excited. Before long, Zhan Tai brought Yi Xian to the belly of Weapon Forging Peak. At this moment, Yi Xian realized that the entire Weapon Forging Peak was empty, and in the belly of the mountain, Yi Xian discovered many Weapon Forging Peak disciples. These disciples were forging weapons. When they saw Zhan Tai, these disciples bowed and sized up Yi Xian curiously. Zhan Tai brought Yi Xian deep into the belly of the mountain. There weren't any other disciples here. Zhan Tai waved his right hand, and the multitude tool cauldron landed on a round table in front of him. Following that, he took a look at Yi Xian. Blood. Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, "What blood?" Zhan Tai was expressionless. "Your blood to nourish the multitude tool cauldron." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. "How much do you need?" Zhan Tai's eyes twitched. "Don't worry, I won't take a bucket of your blood. Just a drop. One drop." Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly and quickly pointed with his finger. A drop of blood shot out from his fingertip and fell steadily into the multitude tool cauldron. Zhan Tai looked at Yi Xian. "Do you want the power of your sword box to become even more terrifying?" Yi Xian said hurriedly. "Of course. The more terrifying, the better." Zhan Tai said indifferently, "You need to set up a sword formation for this sword sheath. Although I know a thing or two about sword formations, I'm not as good as senior brother Gu of the Array Dao Peak. If you can get him to help you set up a formation in this sword sheath, the grade of this sword sheath can reach heaven grade." Array Dao Peak. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. "Is Uncle Master Gu easy to talk to?" Zhan Tai was expressionless. "Depends on the person." "Depends on the person." Yi Xian was speechless. "Depends on the person." He wasn't familiar with the person at all. How could he be easy to talk to? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Uncle Master Zhan, why don't you help me talk to him?" Zhan Tai refused directly. "No. If you want to go, ask your master to go." With that, he turned to the multitude tool cauldron. "You only have 10 days. If he doesn't come to set up a formation in 10 days, I'll just set up a formation for you. Yi Xian. A moment later, Yi Xian left Weapon Forging Peak. He didn't go to Array Dao Peak, but returned to Cloud Sword Peak. After an hour, he made a table full of dishes. Soon Yuqi walked out. Halfway through the meal, Yi Xian suddenly said, Uncle Master Zhantai promised to help me forge a heaven-grade sword box. However, I need Uncle Master Gu's help to set up a formation. Master Yu. Yuqi suddenly put down her chopsticks and glanced at Yi Xian. I'm full. With that, she turned and walked into the inner hall. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. What does this mean? Is Senior Brother Gu from Array Dao Summit a demon? Is he that scary? Yi Xian went straight to Array Dao Peak after sweeping up all the dishes. For the sword box. Even if this Array Dao Peak was a tiger's den, Yi Xian had to give it a try. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at Array Dao Peak. Array Dao Peak was deserted, and there was basically no one around. No, he didn't see anyone. Something was wrong. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he finally came to the main hall of Array Dao Peak, the Array Dao Hall. In front of the hall, Yi Xian bowed slightly. Junior seeks to see Uncle Master Gu. No response. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before bowing again. Seeking to see Uncle Master Gu. At this moment, a voice came from inside the hall. Come in. A woman? Yi Xian was stunned, because the voice was very soft. After hesitating for a moment, Yi Xian walked in. The moment he entered the hall, a pungent aroma assaulted his nostrils. This aroma was too strong. Yi Xian couldn't help but wrinkle his nose. He lifted his head and saw a woman sitting not far away. She wore a white robe that looked like mourning clothes. She sat sideways, and in front of her was a shelf. On the shelf was a piece of white cloth, and she was embroidering something. Beside her was an ice coffin. The entire hall was cold and gloomy. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, before he walked to a few feet away from the woman and bowed. Greetings, Uncle Master Gu. The woman didn't speak. Yi Xian was speechless. There was something wrong with this place and this woman. He hesitated for a moment before saying, Uncle Master Gu. The woman still didn't speak. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. What was this? After a moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Uncle Master Gu. I am forging a heaven-grade sword case, and I need a set of array formation. Uncle Master Zhan of Weapon Forging Peak told me that in our Pale Sword sect, other than him, Uncle Master Gu is the best at Dao Dao array formation. However, he is a little busy, so he hoped that I would come to you to ask for your help in setting up an array formation. The woman suddenly stopped, and turned to look at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian also saw the woman's face. There was no emotion on this face, just like a piece of 10,000-year-old ice. Strangers keep away. This was the feeling that Uncle Master Gu gave Yi Xian. The woman looked at Yi Xian. He is number 1 in array formation? Yi Xian nodded. The woman said, Then why did you come to find me? Yi Xian hurriedly said, But my master said that in terms of Dao Dao array formation, in our Pale Sword sect, no, in the entire Azure Firmament world, Uncle Master Gu is number 1. The woman glanced at Yi Xian. Little junior sister really said that? Yi Xian hurriedly said, It's absolutely true. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to find Uncle Master Gu. The woman said, I'm not free. Not free. Yi Xian's expression froze. He hesitated for a moment, before walking to the woman's side. He chuckled. Uncle Master, my master said that if this sword case doesn't have the support of Master's array formation, it will be a defective item. You can't help me, right? I know how to cook. I will cook for you. The woman stopped. She looked at Yi Xian and stared at him. Yi Xian's scalp went numb from her stare. However, he was thick-skinned, and wasn't afraid of being stared at. He immediately said, Uncle Master Gu, please help me. Get out. The woman suddenly said. Yi Xian sternly said, No. The woman was slightly stunned. Then she looked at Yi Xian. I said get out. Yi Xian was expressionless. I won't go out. The woman looked at Yi Xian for a long time. In the next moment, she waved her right hand, and a wave of sword rays shot out. Boom. Without any suspense, Yi Xian was sent flying out of the hall. But very quickly, he walked back in. Yi Xian sat in the hall. If Uncle Master Gu is not willing to help, I won't leave. The woman glanced at Yi Xian. She didn't say anything, and continued to embroider her things. Yi Xian sat for several hours. When the sky was getting dark, he suddenly turned and ran out. But not long after he ran back. This time, he brought a table of fragrant dishes. Yi Xian walked in front of the man and smiled. Uncle Master Gu, it's time for dinner. The woman didn't say anything. Yi Xian held a dish in front of the woman. Uncle Master Gu, this is fragrant drunken duck. This apprentice nephew has been cooking it for a whole hour. Look at the skin. It's so tender and fresh. Uncle Master Gu, quickly try it. The woman still didn't say anything. Yi Xian was not discouraged. He ate it himself. After eating, Yi Xian didn't leave at night. He slept in the hall. After the woman drove him away, he would sneak back in. In any case, he had already regarded this place as his home. On the third day, Yi Xian held a pot of fish soup in front of the woman. Uncle Master Gu, try it. The freshly cooked fish is very fresh and tender. The woman didn't say anything. Yi Xian was helpless. He was about to leave when the woman suddenly said, "Wait." Yi Xian was stunned. Then, he quickly brought the pot of fish soup in front of the woman. The woman glanced at the fish soup. Yi Xian quickly handed the chopsticks to the woman. The woman picked up the chopsticks and tasted it. Then she nodded slightly. Not bad. Hearing that, Yi Xian was ecstatic. There's no woman I can't conquer. P.S. Yesterday was Chinese New Year's Eve. I ate instant noodles. The shops in the surrounding hospitals are basically closed. I'm about to throw up from eating noodles. It's the most miserable year. Are there any rules? I'll just freeload for Chinese New Year. Don't worry, I'm not a shameless person. I won't refuse to leave. Chapter 291. Ever since the woman took the first bite, Yi Xian knew that there would be a second bite. As expected, the second time he prepared a meal, the woman took a few more bites. As the saying went, since the woman had started eating, she had not tried to drive Yi Xian away. As the saying went, since the woman started eating, she had not tried to drive him away. As for Yi Xian, he would cook a different meal every day. Although it was not as luxurious as a restaurant, it was very suitable for meals. Just like that, a few more days passed. The time limit for war iron was getting shorter and shorter. However, during this time, Yi Xian did not mention anything about the array. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was the time limit for war iron. At noon, after the woman finished eating, Yi Xian was about to leave. At this moment the woman suddenly said, "I'm going out tomorrow. I don't know when I'll be back, so don't come." Yi Xian was stunned, then nodded and smiled. Okay. After saying that, he packed his things and was about to leave. At this moment, the woman suddenly said, "Why didn't you mention the array?" Yi Xian stopped and smiled bitterly. From the bottom of my heart, I naturally hope that Uncle Master will help me. I am also dissatisfied with Uncle Master. You have been so attentive for so many days, all for the array. However, I won't force it. As long as I work hard, it doesn't matter whether I succeed or not. As long as I don't have any regrets. These were his sincere words. To him, he definitely hoped that the woman would set up an array for him. However, if it was not possible, he would not force it. There were many things in life that did not necessarily go as one wished. However, as long as one worked hard, even if it was fruitless, it did not matter. As long as one did not have any regrets. After saying that, Yi Xian chuckled. Uncle Master Gu, if you want to eat in the future, you can come to our Cloudy Sword Peak. After saying that, he turned and left. He left in a carefree manner. Inside the hall, the woman was expressionless as she continued to embroider. Yi Xian did not return to Cloudy Sword Peak. Instead, he went to inquire about the current situation. Today, Pale Sword Sect and Realm Defense Alliance were still fighting in the dark. At the foot of the Pale Sword Sect's mountain, coffins were increasing by the day. Not only that, but the Pale Sword Sect's properties in some places had also disappeared without a trace. As for the Pale Sword Sect disciples outside, they were all summoned back. Even the Azure Sword Sect's eldest senior brother, who was the best at fighting, had yet to return. Apart from that, Another thing was that the spirit qi in many parts of the divine central continent was gradually disappearing. Although they disappeared very slowly and were all in remote places, they were still discovered by people who were observant. Many forces had already sensed danger. As for the Green Province, it was in a terrible situation, but fortunately, both Great Cloud Empire and Ning Kingdom were safe and sound. That was because the Devil Sect and the Blood Sect hadn't done anything to those two countries. Not only had they not done anything to them, but they had even secretly protected them most of the time. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. As for those cultivators who went to Qingzhou, they didn't dare attack the Ning Kingdom and Great Cloud Empire out of fear of him. As for Mo Yunqi and the others, they were still hiding in the dark and cultivating hard. For Yi Xian, it was fine as long as Qingzhou was safe. However, Yi Xian also knew that it would be increasingly difficult to survive in Qingzhou. Regarding this, he already had a plan in mind. Before long, Yi Xian arrived at the belly of Weapon Forging Peak. He found Zhan Tai and smiled bitterly. "Uncle Master Zhan, just make do with whatever escape formation you have." Zhan Tai glanced at Yi Xian. "Why?" Yi Xian shrugged. "I don't have a choice. Uncle Master Gu is a little busy and can't help." At this moment, a woman walked out from the secret chamber behind Zhan Tai. It was Uncle Master Gu. Seeing the woman, Yi Xian was stunned. The woman walked up to Yi Xian. "If you have nothing to do in the future, come to my hall more often. You understand?" Saying that, she turned to look at Zhan Tai. "You know nothing about the Tao of formations." Having said that, she did not stay and left immediately. Zhan Tai glanced at Yi Xian. "What did you say to her?" Yi Xian shook his head hurriedly. I didn't say anything," Zhan Tai said angrily. "You didn't say anything and she started mocking me?" Yi Xian looked very innocent. I don't know either. I really don't know." Zhan Tai glared at Yi Xian. "This little Qi is really something. What kind of item did he get?" Having said that, he turned and left. Yi Xian. For the remaining time, Yi Xian just waiting for the Heaven Grade Sword box to be born. Heaven Grade Sword box. If he had a Heaven Grade Sword box, his flying sword could be put to use again. Heaven Grade Sword and Heaven Grade Sword box. Moreover, it was a Heaven Grade Superior Grade Sword box. Just thinking about it made him excited. Yi Xian sat under a round table, feeling a little bored. As if he thought of something, he suddenly said, "Second floor guru, come out and have a chat." Since the last time he discovered that the Tao Law was a third floor Tao Law, this second floor guru had not spoken again. There was no response from the second floor. Yi Xian did not care and said again, "Second floor guru, tell me, did you do something bad and that's why you're locked up here?" Rumble. Suddenly, the entire second floor shook violently. Yi Xian suddenly felt dizzy and he hurriedly said, "Don't. Let's talk nicely." A moment later, a voice suddenly came from the second floor. "If it wasn't for her, you'd be dead." Mysterious woman. Yi Xian knew that this second floor guru must be talking about the mysterious woman. Speaking of the mysterious woman, Yi Xian suddenly missed her. All this while, the mysterious woman had helped him too much. This chapter is not finished, please continue. At this moment, the second floor guru suddenly said, "Look for the Tao Law. Look for the Tao Law." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Look for it. Don't worry. I'll definitely look for the second Tao Law." Now he realized that the Tao Law was even more useful than a heaven-grade spiritual weapon. Especially the Space Tao Law. If it wasn't for the Space Tao Law, he would need at least 2 to 3 years to reach the Dharma defensive realm. With this Space Tao Law, he comprehended the power of space in advance and reached the Dharma defensive realm in a short period of time. Of course, he couldn't help devouring those swords actually. He still wanted to devour some more. There were so many top-grade swords in the sword catacomb. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Second floor guru, we've known each other for so long, but I still don't know how to address you." The second floor did not answer. Yi Xian shook his head. This guy was not easy to get along with. I wonder what's locked up on the 9th floor. Yi Xian was suddenly a little curious. He tried to sense the 9th floor, but he could not feel anything. Now, he could only sense the 3rd floor at most. He couldn't even sense the fourth floor. At this moment, the second floor guru suddenly said, "If she doesn't come back, you can wait for death. 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 Wait for death." This time, he said wait for death dozens of times. Yi Xian snorted coldly and thought to himself, "What's there to be afraid of? At most, I'll commit suicide and perish together with this tower. Everyone will be doomed." At this moment, Zhantai suddenly walked out. "Come in." Yi Xian hurriedly got up and followed Zhantai into the secret chamber. As soon as he entered the secret chamber, Yi Xian felt a powerful sword energy. The source of the sword energy was the myriad tool cauldron. Was he going to succeed? Yi Xian was a little excited. Zhantai suddenly said, "Blood." Yi Xian nodded quickly and pointed with his finger. A drop of blood flew out from his fingertip and fell steadily into the myriad tool cauldron. Soon, the myriad tool cauldron shook violently, and a sword light flashed out. Yi Xian became even more excited. From this sign, this was definitely a good treasure. After some time, Zhantai said again, "Blood." Yi Xian hurriedly put another drop of blood in. Just like this, after about 2 hours, the entire myriad tool cauldron suddenly shook violently. But the next moment, the myriad tool cauldron calmed down. There was no more movement. Not far away, Zhantai was expressionless. Yi Xian was stunned and then said, "What does this mean?" Zhantai said calmly, "What does it mean? It means failure." "Failure?" Yi Xian jumped up. "What? Failure? Are you kidding me?" Zhantai looked provocatively at Yi Xian. "If you're not happy, come and hit me." Yi Xian. End of this chapter. Chapter 292. Hearing Zhantai's words, Yi Xian was relieved, because he knew it was likely to succeed. Sure enough, Zhantai walked to the cauldron of thousand tools. He waved his right hand, and the lid of the cauldron flew out. Then a sword case floated out. The sword case was wide, dark gold in color, and emitted a faint dark gold luster. Simple grand. This was Yi Xian's feeling. Like. Yi Xian walked to the cauldron of thousand tools. Zhantai suddenly said, "Blood." Yi Xian pointed with his finger, and a drop of blood flew into the sword case. The sword case trembled slightly and soon, he established a connection with it. The sword case flew to Yi Xian, and at this moment, a sword suddenly flew out from the cauldron of thousand tools. The sword was 1 finger wide, 4 feet long, and had no hilt, only a blade. Apart from that, the sword was very thin, the thinnest sword Yi Xian had ever seen. "This is..." Yi Xian looked at Zhantai. Zhantai said calmly, "This flying sword is a set with the sword case. It is also a heaven-class item, but it is only a low-grade heaven-class item. There is also an array inside the sword. When 2 arrays are used together, it is more powerful." Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the sword flew into his hand. When he touched the sword, Yi Xian couldn't help but exclaim, "Too thin." It was so thin that it seemed weightless. "Give it a name." Zhantai suddenly said, "Name it." Yi Xian nodded quickly. "Okay." He touched it for a long time, and then said, "This sword case is dark gold. Let's call it Little Dark. This sword is so thin. Let's call it Little Bow." Beside him, Zhantai was dumbfounded. "Are you serious?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Zhantai suddenly became angry. Get lost, get lost." Yi Xian chuckled. He walked up to War Iron and said, "Martial uncle, these 2 items were personally forged by you. Of course, you should be the one to name them." War Iron glanced at Yi Xian, and then he said, "This sword chest is forged from special dark gold, and it was born in my Azure Sword sect. So I'll call it Dark Azure. As for this sword, it's thinner than a cicada's wing, almost formless. Let's call it Graceful Swan." Yi Xian hurriedly said, Good. Dark Song Jinghong, Uncle Master's name is really good." Zhantai said indifferently, "Don't disgrace them." With that he turned around and left. Yi Xian hurriedly bowed deeply. After War Iron entered the darkroom, Yi Xian turned around and left. Yi Xian returned directly to Cloudsword Peak. At the back of the mountain, Yi Xian stood on the spot with the sword chest on his back. Suddenly, a strand of sword light flew out from the swordsman on his back. In the next moment, a leaf fell slowly from an ancient tree 300 m away. The sword was silent, formless, and traceless. At this moment, Yi Xian was slightly shocked in his heart. The sword chest and flying sword were more than 10 times faster than before. Previously, his flying sword could only threaten a Dharma defensive realm expert. But against a true Dharma defensive realm expert, his flying sword was completely useless. But now, the speed and might of his flying sword was completely capable of threatening a true Dharma realm expert. Even if he didn't launch a sneak attack now, he could still fight a true Dharma realm expert. Right at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared before Yi Xian, and the old man glanced at Yi Xian. "Come to Azure Sword Hall." With that, he turned around and vanished. Yi Xian kept his sword and sword chest, and then he headed straight for Azure Sword Hall. Not long later, Yi Xian arrived at the hall. In the hall, he saw two people, and he knew one of them. It was that Nangong from before. The other person was a man, around 21 or 22 years old. The man was about 21 or 22 years old. He wore a long black robe and had a straight back. He held a sword in his hand. Seeing Yi Xian enter, both of them looked at Yi Xian, and Nangong smiled lightly. "Brother, and come, let me introduce you." With that, he gestured to the man beside him. "Senior brother Shang Yu." Yi Xian faced the man called Shang Yu and bowed in a junior brother's greeting. "Greetings, senior brother Shang Yu." Seeing this, Shang Yu glanced at Yi Xian, and then he returned the greeting. "We're all from the same sect, so we should take care of each other in the future. If there's anything, just let me know." Yi Xian smiled. "Definitely." The three of them looked at each other and smiled. Yi Xian was very clearly aware that there was definitely internal strife within the Blue Sword sect, especially amongst the younger generation, and his objective in coming to the Blue Sword sect wasn't for the position of Blue Sword sect's sect master. So to him, if he could get on good terms with others, then he would. He deeply believed that a weirdo like Lan Yu was probably very rare. After the three of them chatted for a while, Chen Beihan suddenly walked in, and when he saw the three of them getting along well, Chen Beihan nodded in his heart, and then he glanced at Yi Xian with a trace of praise in his eyes. It was rare for a young man to be talented, but it was even rarer to have talent and not be arrogant. Chen Beihan glanced at the three of them. "I called the three of you here because I have a mission for the three of you." As he spoke, he sat at the side, and then he continued, "I presume all of you are clearly aware of the matters between my Blue Sword sect and the Realm Defense Alliance. This time, the three of you will represent my Blue Sword sect on a trip to the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range, Heavenly Cord sect, and the Ancient Wu clan." Yi Xian suddenly asked, "For what?" Chen Beihan smiled. "To discuss the matter of forming an alliance with them." Forming an alliance. Yi Xian's group of three were slightly shocked. Forming an alliance was a huge matter, and he was sending the three of them? Chen Beihan didn't say anything, and he just waved his hand. "Go now." Yi Xian's group of three exchanged glances, and then they turned around and left the hall. Outside the hall, Nangong spoke in a solemn voice. "Why send the three of us? Is it just for tempering us?" Shang Yu spoke softly. "If I'm not wrong, besides tempering us, it's also to let the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range, Heavenly Cord sect, and the Ancient Wu clan experience the younger generation of our Blue Sword sect." "Why?" Nangong was slightly puzzled. Shang Yu smiled and said, "The most important thing for a sect isn't just its resources and reserves. It needs fresh blood as well. If there's no successor, then no matter how great the sect's resources and reserves are, it's only a matter of time before it falls into decline. The sect master has clearly sent the three of us to show them that our Blue Sword sect has successors." Nangong and Yi Xian came to an understanding when they heard this. Going out this time, there would definitely be danger, and this danger was the tempering. And this mission was actually to let the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range and the other forces see what the Blue Sword sect's younger generation was like, because the Blue Sword sect's foundation didn't need to be seen to know. Not to mention those in the dark. Just the 7 sword immortals in the open were sufficient to explain everything. Meanwhile, Shang Yu spoke abruptly. "The three of us have great responsibilities." Yi Xian and Nangong nodded. If the three of them couldn't satisfy the sect master, then the alliance might not be formed. Shang Yu suddenly said, I suggest we split up. Nangong asked why. Shang Yu spoke in a low voice. Firstly, it'll be faster, and the three of us can go to 3 different places. Secondly, the three of us are too big of a target, and the Realm Protection Alliance will definitely not let this matter go. When he spoke up to here, he smiled bitterly. Even if something happens to one of us, there's still hope for the other two. Yi Xian smiled. Brother Shang Yu, don't be pessimistic. There's nothing to be afraid of about the Realm Protection Alliance. Shang Yu shook his head. That's because you don't know them well. In short, the Realm Protection Alliance has been able to stand tall in the firmament world for so many years, and that's enough to explain many things. Yi Xian nodded. That was true. Even though he'd met Exalted Lord Lu, he hadn't seen the overall strength of the Realm Protection Alliance. The Realm Protection Alliance was still a mystery to him. Shang Yu spoke abruptly. I've been to the 10,000 Beast Mountain range to temper myself, so I'll go there. What about the two of you? Nangong said. Then I'll go to the Heavenly Cord sect, my sister is there, and I'll go there to see her. Yi Xian smiled. Then I can only go to the ancient Wu clan. Shang Yu spoke in a low voice. Brethren, the ancient Wu clan is quite mysterious and strange. Why don't you swap places with me? Yi Xian smiled. It's fine, I have a good temper, and it just so happens that they're strange. Shang Yu smiled. Then take care of yourselves, junior brothers. Remember to keep in touch with the sound transmission stone at any time. Today, the three of us will leave the sect together, and we must meet again in the future. With that, he turned around and soared into the sky on his sword. Sword Emperor. Shang Yu was also a Sword Emperor. Nangong spoke abruptly. Senior brother Shang Yu is thinking for my sake. Yi Xian looked at Nangong, and Nangong smiled. The ancient Wu clan, the 10,000 Beast Mountain range, and the Heavenly Cord sect. Amongst them, the Heavenly Cord sect is slightly weaker, so their requirements will definitely be lower. If I go to the 10,000 Beast Mountain range, or the ancient Wu clan, they won't take a liking to me before I become a Sword Emperor. Yi Xian patted Nangong's shoulder lightly. As a swordsman, your mentality is the most important, and you can't be imbalanced. Senior brother Shang Yu's good intentions are more important than anything else. Nangong smiled. That's true. Yi Xian smiled. Let's meet again. With that, he turned around and soared into the sky on his sword, and disappeared into the horizon in a few moments. Nangong remained silent for a moment, and he shook his head and sighed. I have to work hard. With that, he soared into the sky and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. After the three of them left, Chen Beihan suddenly walked out. He glanced at the horizon, and no one knew what he was thinking about. At the horizon, Yi Xian was flying swiftly on his sword. At this moment, he was among the clouds, and wherever his sword passed, the clouds were torn apart layer by layer. Flying on a sword between heaven and earth. This had once been his dream, and now it could be considered to have come true. His only regret was that his younger sister wasn't here. If she were here, she would definitely be very happy. Yi Ling. Yi Xian secretly decided that once he was done with his business, he would make a trip to the Mystic Gate. A moment later, Yi Xian collected his thoughts and took out a scroll. The scroll recorded the location of the ancient Wu clan and information about the ancient Wu clan. The ancient Wu clan was a mysterious force. In the Divine Central Continent, some forces were out in the open, such as the Pale Sword sect and the 10,000 Beast Mountain range, while some forces were in the dark. Few people knew about these forces, but that didn't mean they weren't strong. And the ancient Wu clan was very strong. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped and looked into the distance. Come out. I've already discovered you. There was no response. A quarter of an hour later, Yi Xian continued forward on his sword. Every hour, Yi Xian would stop and say something. About 4 hours later, Yi Xian stopped again and clasped his hands behind his back. Come out. I've already discovered you. At this moment, 2 old men suddenly appeared in front of him. Yi Xian. The one in the lead was Emoshio. Emoshio glared at Yi Xian. How did you discover us? Yi Xian. M. Chapter 293. How did he find out? Yi Xian's face was filled with black lines. Could it be that he was just guessing? From the moment he left Pale Sword Sect, he knew that the Realm Defense Alliance wouldn't take this lying down. But he was even more aware that if a true defensive law realm expert was following him, it would be difficult for him to discover that person. Thus, along the way, he would ask the same question every once in a while. He didn't expect that he would actually ask the right question. Emoshio. Yi Xian was expressionless. Your Realm Defense Alliance is really like a lingering ghost that won't go away. Emoshio coldly said. Yi Xian, do you really think that Pale Sword Sect can protect you? Yi Xian said with a smile. Why don't you find someone who can protect me? Emoshio stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Surrender, submit to my Realm Defense Alliance. Yi Xian was stunned. He wanted him to submit to the Realm Defense Alliance? Yi Xian had a stunned expression. Are you serious? Emoshio stared at Yi Xian. Naturally. With your talent, if you are willing to join my Realm Defense Alliance, my Realm Defense Alliance will definitely treat you well. Yi Xian was silent, seeming to be moved. At this time, Emoshio said, just you wait, once the price rises to a certain degree, Pale Sword Sect will surely abandon you. At that time, you Yi Xian will truly be driven into a corner. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, this matter is of great importance. I need to think about it. Give me a few days to think about it. How about it? Emoshio's eyes narrowed. You want to delay for time? Yi Xian smiled. To tell the truth, I don't really believe in your Realm Defense Alliance, so I need to think about it. Of course, you can act now, but let's see if you can kill me. Emoshio coldly sneered. You're that confident? Yi Xian spread his hands. Why don't we try? Emoshio smiled and said, I'll give it a try. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his palm towards Yi Xian from afar. In an instant, the space in front of Yi Xian fluctuated, and then a powerful strand of spatial energy swept out from that expanse of space and smashed towards him. The power of space. Yi Xian stood in the air, his right hand suddenly clenched. Imprison. As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly stabilized. At the same time, the spatial energy that Emoshio had released was directly imprisoned by space. However, it didn't vanish, and it was still surging within space. Seeing this scene, Emoshio, who was not far away, frowned deeply. Spell defensive state. No, you can't break through my power of space just by relying on the law defensive realm. Yi Xian said with a straight face. Actually, I'm at the true Imperial Magic Realm. Bullshit. Emoshio suddenly angrily said. Yi Xian, do you think that the old man is a fool? The current you is far from the level of the true defensive Dharma realm. The reason you're able to control the energy of space is definitely because of something else. Yi Xian smiled and said, yes, I really haven't attained the true Imperial Magic Realm now. However, since I've attained the true Imperial Magic Realm, then am I still far from it? Emoshio's expression gradually became gloomy when he heard this. Yi Xian's speed of improvement was truly too terrifying. The law defensive realm. Presently, he didn't have full confidence in his ability to kill Yi Xian when facing Yi Xian. On the other hand, if Yi Xian attained the true Imperial Magic Realm, then with the terrifying combat strength that Yi Xian possessed, Yi Xian would probably be able to fight him equally. Emoshio went silent for a moment before he said, I'll give you 2 days to consider it. Yi Xian, you're a smart person, and you ought to know what's best for you. As soon as he finished speaking, the three of them turned around and left. Yi Xian chuckled lightly on the spot, and then he rode his sword and vanished into the horizon. On the other side, an old man by Emoshio's side spoke abruptly. He won't surrender to my Realm Defense Alliance. This chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. Emoshio spoke indifferently. I know. The old man gazed at Emoshio with a puzzled expression, and Emoshio spoke in a light voice. Do you think the three of us can kill him? The old man spoke in a low voice. If the Firmament Sword Sect doesn't make a move, Then the three of us will definitely be able to kill him if we join forces. Emoshio spoke indifferently. Then do you think they won't make a move? The old man fell silent. Because the Firmament Sword sect would definitely make a move. Emoshio's eyes slowly closed. The Exalt Lord should have made a move himself that day. Yi Xian's speed of growth was truly slightly terrifying to him. Especially now that Yi Xian had joined the Firmament Sword sect. The combination of the two was undoubtedly like a tiger that had grown wings. The old man by Emoshio's side sighed in a low voice. That mysterious woman is truly too terrifying. She broke the array that the Exalt Lord had set up in the firmament world with a single sword strike. With such strength, it's normal for the Exalt Lord to be afraid. Emoshio shook his head. If he was afraid, then he shouldn't have made an enemy out of her. This Yi Xian originally didn't have much of a conflict with us, but now we've become sworn enemies. This is truly not a wise move. The old man sighed in a low voice. Who would have known that he would be such a monstrous genius? Now there's no meaning in saying all this. What we need to do now is to find a way to eliminate this person and the Firmament Sword sect. Now that the Firmament Sword sect has openly provoked my Realm Defense Alliance, if we don't eliminate them, then the prestige of my Realm Defense Alliance in the Firmament world will be completely gone. Firmament Sword sect. Emoshio's eyes gradually turned cold. They're courting death. Finished speaking, the three of them quickly disappeared. Half a day later, Yi Xian arrived in front of a mountain range. The ancient Wu clan was located in the depths of this mountain range. He didn't know much about the ancient Wu clan. However, to be valued by the Firmament Sword sect and be invited to form an alliance, it was definitely not a weak clan. After Yi Xian entered the boundless mountain range, he secretly became vigilant in his heart. This was because he discovered that within this mountain range, there was a lot of poisonous gas. Some of the poisonous gas could be clearly smelled, but some of the poisonous gas were invisible. However, Yi Xian also discovered that even if he didn't use his sword intent to protect his body, he would still be fine. After he inhaled the poisonous gas, it completely disappeared without a trace. Primal Chaos Energy. These poisonous gas were all purified by the Primal Chaos Energy. After discovering this, Yi Xian was wild with joy, because he didn't expect that the Primal Chaos Energy would actually have such an effect. This meant that he, Yi Xian, was immune to 100 poisons. Good stuff. Yi Xian chuckled and continued forward. In a short while he arrived in the depths of the mountain range. In the depths of the mountain range, towering ancient trees stood towering everywhere. These trees were extremely tall, enormous, and like a canopy, they blotted out the sky and covered the sun. After walking for an unknown amount of time, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. On the ground there were things wriggling. Not only on the ground, but there were things wriggling on the surrounding trees as well. Yi Xian's sword eye opened, and in next to no time, he felt a chill run down his spine. The ground in front of him, and the surrounding trees were all covered in snakes, a dense mass of small black snakes. At this moment, these snakes were actually staring at him. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I'm Yi Xian, and I've come under the orders of the sect leader to seek an audience with the ancient Wu clan's patriarch." There was no response, but the surrounding poisonous snakes had already started wriggling towards him. Seeing this, Yi Xian frowned. In the next moment he opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his palm. Subsequently, a powerful strand of sword intent swept out from within his body. Evil sword intent. The moment the evil will sword appeared, the surrounding poisonous snakes all retreated. However, there were still some poisonous snakes that charged towards him. Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he raised his sword and slashed. This chapter isn't finished. Please continue to the next page. Hiss! A wave of sword light flashed, and the heads of countless poisonous snakes fell to the ground. Right at this moment, an angry shout suddenly resounded from the distant dense forest. "How dare you!" As soon as this voice resounded, a pitch-black vine suddenly shot out from afar, and there was a jet-black poisonous snake coiled around this black vine. Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he stabbed out with his sword. Bang! The black vine was instantly sent flying. Meanwhile, a man appeared not too far away from Yi Xian. The man wore a short shirt and black trousers, and there were some strange drawings on his face and exposed skin. The man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Who are you?" Yi Xian cupped his fists. Pale Sword Sect's Yi Xian, under the sect leader's order to seek an audience with the ancient Wu clan's patriarch. Pale Sword Sect. The man frowned slightly. "You're from the Pale Sword Sect." Yi Xian nodded. The man pointed at the black snakes on the ground with their heads cut off. "Why did you kill my snakes?" Yi Xian said. "It wasn't me who wanted to kill your snakes. It was your snakes that wanted to kill me." "Bullshit," the man said angrily. "It was you who trespassed into my ancient Wu clan. That's why they attacked you. If you didn't trespass into my ancient Wu clan, how could they possibly attack you?" Yi Xian said indifferently. "Brother, when I arrived here, I already sensed that you were hiding in the shadows. So, I took the initiative to announce my identity in the beginning, because I hoped that you would come out. Unfortunately, you didn't come out. Not only did you not come out, but you also didn't make these snakes of yours retreat. According to my guess, you intentionally made these snakes attack me. Unfortunately, you underestimated my strength, right?" The man's expression instantly became slightly unsightly when he heard this, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "All I know is that not only did you trespass into my ancient Wu clan, but you also killed my snakes. You deserve death, you." Just at this moment, the man's voice stopped abruptly, because a sword was already pressed against his forehead. The anger in the man's eyes had already turned into terror. Yi Xian turned his head to the right. "What? Is this how the ancient Wu clan treats its guests?" Soon, an old man walked out from there, and the old man glanced at Yi Xian. "Your Excellency attacked as soon as you arrived at the ancient Wu clan. No matter how I look at it, you don't seem like a guest." Yi Xian put away his sword and said with a smile, "I attacked for his own good." The old man said indifferently, "Really? How is it for his own good? Tell me about it." Yi Xian said with a smile, "In the outside world, the strong are respected. I think your Excellency should be clear about this. As for this brother, he clearly knows that he can't defeat me, but he still provoked me again and again. To be honest, if he goes out with his character, I'm afraid that he won't live for more than a few days. What do you think?" In front of Yi Xian, the man said angrily, "Do you think you are?" At this moment, Yi Xian's sword once again pressed against the man's forehead, and the man's voice stopped abruptly again. Yi Xian faced the man. "Do you see how weak you are? If I want to kill you, I can do it easily. It doesn't matter if you are weak, because as long as you work hard, anyone can go from weak to strong. However, if you are weak and still want to be arrogant, then you are stupid." The man stared at Yi Xian and sneered. "Do you dare to kill me? You don't dare. You." At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stabbed out with his sword. Chi. The man's forehead was instantly pierced by Yi Xian's sword. The man's eyes were wide open, and his eyes were full of disbelief. Yi Xian smiled slightly. "I dare to really. I'm not lying to you. P.S. Brothers, for the sake that I've been working late these days, give me a monthly ticket. Every ticket is love." End of this chapter. Chapter 294. It wasn't just the man's eyes that were filled with disbelief. Even the nearby old man had an expression of shock. Obviously, he hadn't expected that Yi Xian would actually kill him. The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You actually dared to kill him?" Yi Xian smiled. "He thought I didn't dare. I just wanted to prove that I dare." The old man's expression was rather savage. "This is the ancient Wu clan, not your Firmament Sword sect." Yi Xian smiled. "I've already given him 2 chances. Unfortunately, he didn't cherish it. Since it's like that, then let him die. As for you, if you're dissatisfied, then attack." As he spoke, a formidable aura suddenly swept out from his body. The Sword Emperor's aura. The old man's expression instantly changed when he saw this Sword Emperor's aura. He gazed at Yi Xian with slight disbelief. You're actually the Sword Emperor." Yi Xian's face was expressionless. Notify him that Yi Xian represents the Firmament Sword sect to request an audience with the ancient Wu clan's patriarch. The old man's expression was rather unsightly. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression suddenly turned cold. What are you waiting for? The old man glanced deeply at Yi Xian before he turned around and left. On the spot, Yi Xian faced the man on the ground who was still breathing, and the man was staring resentfully at him. Yi Xian smiled. Do you think the ancient Wu clan will take revenge for you? No, they won't. Because they don't dare. How arrogant. Needless to say, Yi Xian really was arrogant enough. But this time, he'd intentionally acted so arrogantly. Of course, the reason he'd killed the man was because the man had aroused killing intent towards him when he'd accidentally entered this place for the first time. Just as he'd said, the man had noticed him the first time he'd come here. But the man hadn't stopped those venomous snakes. Obviously, the man wanted to use him to feed those venomous snakes. Unfortunately, the man had misjudged Chen Shi's strength. For the sake of the Guwu clan, he gave the man 2 chances. However, the man thought that he was afraid. Some people were like this. If you took a step back, they wouldn't think that you were being magnanimous. Instead, they would think that you were afraid of them. Then they would become even more insatiable. No matter how many of such people there were, Yi Xian would kill them all. I'm giving you convenience, but you can't treat it as anything. Very soon, the old man from before walked over again. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and said, The patriarch wants to see you. Yi Xian nodded. Please lead the way. The old man glanced at the man's corpse on the ground. The man's aura was getting weaker and weaker. He slowly raised his hand towards the old man, as if he wanted to say something. The old man sighed in a low voice. You should maintain due respect for the strong. After that, he led Yi Xian into the depths of the dense forest in the distance. On the spot, the man's eyes were wide open. He had really died with a grievance. Under the old man's lead, Yi Xian entered a small village. Unlike ordinary villages, the houses here were built on ancient trees with a long history. On both sides of the village, there were some stalls. Besides miscellaneous goods, there were also some rare treasures. Yi Xian even saw a heaven-grade treasure. It was a little strange. The old man led Yi Xian to a treehouse. This treehouse was very big, much bigger than the other treehouses. Moreover, on the roof of the treehouse, there was a pair of huge horns and some mysterious runes. In front of the treehouse, the old man bowed deeply to the treehouse. Patriarch, he's here. A voice sounded from inside the treehouse. Come in. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Outside the treehouse, the old man looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked in. The interior of the treehouse was very simple. There were only a few tree chairs and a wooden table. And in front of him stood a woman. From her appearance, she looked very young. She wore a skirt made of leaves that only reached her knees. Below her knees was a pair of jade-white thighs, and in her hand was a wooden staff. And the woman's aura was deep like the sea. An expert. This was Yi Xian's first impression. The woman sized up Yi Xian. In the next moment, a powerful pressure suddenly pressed down on Yi Xian. In an instant, Yi Xian's body felt like it was being pressed down by a mountain. Bang! A powerful imperial sword aura suddenly swept out from his body. This imperial sword aura forcefully blocked the woman's pressure. But in next to no time, the woman took a step forward. As her step descended, the pressure she emitted instantly multiplied. Kacha! In an instant, the bones in Yi Xian's body started to make cracking sounds. And Yi Xian's legs actually started to slowly bend, as if he was about to kneel down. The imperial sword aura could not block it. Yi Xian's expression was quite ferocious. In the next moment, he suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground. Bang! A powerful force suddenly emanated from his body. And this force, coupled with his sword emperor's aura, actually forcefully blocked the pressure that the woman had released. Earth force. Facing such an expert, Yi Xian did not dare to hide his strength. He directly released the earth force. In front of Yi Xian, the woman glanced at Yi Xian. Imperial sword aura, and this earth force. You are that Yi Xian, who was wanted by the Realm Protection Alliance? Yi Xian nodded. That's me. The woman walked in front of Yi Xian. She looked straight at Yi Xian. You killed a member of my ancient Wu clan. Yi Xian said seriously. Heaven and earth can bear witness. He was the one who attacked first. The woman looked straight at Yi Xian. Do you think I don't dare to kill you? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Forgive me for asking, but is the ancient Wu clan stronger or the Realm Protection Alliance stronger? The woman's lips curled up. You want to tell me that if the Realm Protection Alliance doesn't dare to kill you, how could my ancient Wu clan dare? Yi Xian shook his head. Patriarch misunderstands. I came to the ancient Wu clan this time, without any malicious intent. As for that clansman of yours, I have already let him off twice. Unfortunately, he did not cherish it. If Patriarch takes this matter to heart, then I can't do anything about it. The woman sat down on a wooden stool. She stared at Yi Xian. Go back and tell Chen Beihan that with this alliance, my ancient Wu clan has no way of forming an alliance with your Blue Sword sect. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Saying that, he turned around and left. The woman was stunned. This fellow didn't care at all? Yi Xian, naturally didn't care. It wasn't that he didn't care about the Blue Sword sect, but he was very clear that whether or not these two great influences would form an alliance wasn't something a disciple like him could decide. The reason he came here, just as Shang Yu said, was to let the ancient Wu clan see the strength of the Blue Sword sect's younger generation. That was all. As for whether or not the alliance was formed, that was something for the Blue Sword sect patriarch to worry about. Yi Xian left decisively. He directly exited the treehouse and was about to fly away on his flying sword. But at this time, the ancient Wu clan patriarch suddenly said, Do you know what kind of situation your Blue Sword sect is in right now? Yi Xian stopped and shook his head. I'm not too sure. Ancient, this chapter has yet to end. Please continue to the next page. The Wu clan patriarch coldly sneered. Everyone is watching your Blue Sword sect and the Realm Protection Alliance, waiting to see who wins and who loses. But what you don't know is that there are already many forces standing on the side of the Realm Protection Alliance. Yi Xian shook his head. I'm just an ordinary disciple. These are all matters that my Blue Sword sect patriarch should worry about. Even if Senior told me, it would be useless. The ancient Wu clan patriarch coldly sneered. Because of your momentary stubbornness, my ancient Wu clan has decided not to form an alliance with your Blue Sword sect. Do you know what this means to your Blue Sword sect? Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. Patriarch, forgive me for being blunt. Whether to form an alliance or not, I'm afraid you have already made your decision. Am I right? The woman looked at Yi Xian, but didn't say anything. Yi Xian continued. On the surface, the Realm Protection Alliance is indeed stronger than my Blue Sword sect. But how many people in the Blue Firmament world trust the Realm Protection Alliance? In order to achieve their goal, the Realm Protection Alliance didn't hesitate to sacrifice Blue Water Province and Azure Province. Do you know how many lives there are in these two provinces? However, in the eyes of the Realm Protection Alliance, these lives are truly worthless. Forming an alliance with them will not end well for you, the woman said indifferently. Then my ancient Wu clan can just sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Yi Xian smiled. The Realm Protection Alliance is happy to see you like this. Because once they deal with a few of the more difficult to deal with, the rest of you will be easy for them to need. At that time, if your ancient Wu clan wishes to find someone to form an alliance with, you will find to your despair that there is no one left to contact. When he spoke up to hear, he turned to face the woman. Presently, there are many remote places in the Central Divine Prefecture where the spirit energy is starting to dry up. Even an idiot would know that this is the doing of the Realm Protection Alliance. If the Realm Protection Alliance really wishes to destroy the Central Divine Prefecture, then what will your ancient Wu clan do? At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the side. You don't have to worry about that. It was a beautiful woman. Obviously, she was a member of the ancient Wu clan as well. The beautiful woman glanced at Yi Xian and said, My ancient Wu clan has always stood aloof from the world. Our presence here doesn't harm the interests of the Realm Protection Alliance, so they won't act against us. Yi Xian smiled and said, If you think standing aloof from the world is a good thing, then I can't do anything about it. However, I have to say one more thing. In the current world, if one doesn't possess formidable strength, or doesn't have formidable allies, then standing aloof from the world is simply waiting for death. To be honest, my ancient Wu clan isn't strong to the point that no one dares to offend you. The beautiful woman sneered. Will forming an alliance with your Blue Sword sect bring good results? If your Blue Sword sect is defeated, then wouldn't my ancient Wu clan be buried with your Blue Sword sect? Yi Xian nodded. You're right. If my Blue Sword sect is defeated, then our allies will definitely be finished as well. However, doing great things naturally comes with risks. But what if we win? The beautiful woman still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian shook his head and said, This matter is between you and my Blue Sword sect master. I, Yi Xian, am just an ordinary disciple. I've already arrived at the ancient Wu clan and conveyed my sect's purpose to you. My mission has been completed. I'm leaving. Goodbye. Finishing his words, he directly walked out of the treehouse and rode on his sword, disappearing into the horizon in a short while. Inside the treehouse, the beautiful woman was about to speak when both of them suddenly looked outside the treehouse at the same time. In the distant horizon, a sword light was flying towards them. The person who had just left was none other than Yi Xian. He's back again? Both of their brows furrowed. Yi Xian landed in front of the treehouse, and then he walked into the treehouse. He bowed slightly to the two. I was impolite just now. Please don't blame me. And I think we can continue to chat. The two women. End of chapter. Chapter 295. Dao Laws. The reason why Yi Xian had returned was because of Dao Laws. The great god on the second floor said that there was the aura of Dao Laws here. Therefore, Yi Xian had no choice but to return. Inside the treehouse, the two women just looked at Yi Xian, causing Yi Xian to feel slightly unnatural. The beautiful woman suddenly said, Aren't you leaving? Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. I'm not leaving. When I first came to the ancient Wu clan, I was attracted by this place. If the two of you don't mind, I would like to stay here for a few more days. We mind very much. The beautiful woman suddenly interrupted Yi Xian. You have a glib tongue and a cheeky smile. Not a person who knows his place. As you said before, whether your Pale Sword sect and my ancient Wu clan can form an alliance is our matter. As for you, go back to where you came from. Yi Xian hurriedly said. No, as a disciple of the Pale Sword sect, the Pale Sword sect's matters are naturally my matters. Seniors, you might have misunderstood me before, but it's all right. When you truly get to know me, you'll realize that I'm actually a very, very good person. Hearing this, the beautiful woman's eyes twitched. How can your skin be so thick? Yi Xian. At this moment, the ancient Wu clan patriarch suddenly said, If he wants to stay, then let him stay. The beautiful woman was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly bowed. Thank you, patriarch. The ancient Wu clan patriarch glanced at Yi Xian. Leave. Remember, don't cause trouble, otherwise bear the consequences. Yi Xian hurriedly said, I'm a good person, I won't act recklessly. With that, he left the treehouse. Inside the treehouse, the beautiful woman said in a low voice, This person is a little strange. The ancient Wu clan patriarch said indifferently, I know. The beautiful woman was somewhat puzzled. Then why do you want him to stay, patriarch? The patriarch of the ancient Wu clan said softly, Our ancient Wu clan doesn't interact with people outside the world all year round, so the younger generation knows very little about the outside world. Leaving him here can let the people in the clan see the geniuses outside, and let them understand that there is always someone better than you out there. The beautiful woman nodded. That's true. Actually, it's not just the younger generation of the clan. Even some of the elders should go out and see the outside world. Otherwise, they will really think that our ancient Wu clan is invincible in the firmament world. The clan leader of the Gu Wu clan walked to the front of the treehouse. She glanced at Yi Xian, who was wandering around blindly. This man has a glib tongue. You have to watch him carefully. Don't let him do anything stupid. The beautiful woman nodded. I will keep an eye on him. Below, Yi Xian wandered around for a long time. Finally, he sat down on the side of the street. At this moment, he was conversing with the god on the second floor. God on the second floor, did you sense it? Yi Xian asked. No. The god on the second floor answered directly. Yi Xian's face darkened. Didn't you just say that you sensed the power of the Tao Law? The god on the second floor said coldly. It's gone now. Yi Xian's face darkened even more. Are you messing with me? The second floor suddenly shook violently, as if it was going crazy. Yi Xian was speechless. He hugged his head. What kind of temper was this? He got angry at the slightest provocation, and went crazy at the slightest provocation. The problem was that he couldn't offend him. It was too aggrieving. Yi Xian really wanted to pull him out and beat him up. Unfortunately, his intuition told him that he couldn't beat the god on the second floor for the time being. About a quarter of an hour later, the god on the second floor finally calmed down. Yi Xian thought about it and said, You sensed it earlier, but then you couldn't. Is it possible that the aura of the Tao Law was concealed by something? There was no answer. Yi Xian said solemnly, If you find the Tao Law, you can come out. The god on the second floor suddenly said angrily, Fine, I won't come out. Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Xian almost broke down because of this guy. Didn't he just say one sentence? Did he have to be angry to this extent? Was he a King kid? This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. After a long time, Yi Xian thought about it and said, Well, God on the second floor, don't be angry. We have to work together. Only by working together can we achieve a win-win situation. A moment later, the god on the second floor suddenly said, The aura of the Tao Law has disappeared, but it must be here. Look for it. Yi Xian nodded slightly. What is this second Tao Law? The god on the second floor said coldly, I don't know. Yi Xian's face darkened. Was this guy still angry? At this moment, the god on the second floor said again, This I really don't know. Yi Xian was stunned, then said, You're on the second floor, how can you not know? The god on the second floor asked in return, You're the pagoda master. If you don't know, why must I know? Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Xian didn't want to argue with the god on the second floor anymore. He had to let it calm down first, otherwise, he wouldn't be able to communicate with it. Now he also realized that the god on the second floor was a petty guy. You couldn't say anything to it, because it would go crazy if you did. Yi Xian walked down the street. Along the way, he saw many people from the ancient Wu clan. He had to admit that the women from the ancient Wu clan were a little different from the women outside. The women here were relatively more cheerful and enthusiastic. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped in front of a small stall. The stall owner was a little girl about 12 years old, wearing a blue floral dress, with several whips tied on her head. She was selling a few bamboo tubes as long as an arm. Yi Xian pointed at the bamboo tubes curiously. Little sister, what's in them? The little girl glanced at Yi Xian. Dew, morning dew. Dew. Yi Xian was stunned, then asked, What's the use? The little girl said softly, Of course, to drink. Yi Xian asked again, How much is it? The little girl raised a finger. 100 top-grade spirit stones for one tube. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. Why don't you rob a bank? You sell one dew for 100 top-grade spirit stones. The little girl hugged her feet and didn't speak. Yi Xian picked up a bamboo tube, then opened it, and a fragrant smell hit his face. Yi Xian was shocked. He drank a mouthful, and the water went down his throat. It was sweet and cool. After a while, Yi Xian's expression became quite serious, because he found that after the water entered his body, it actually started to cleanse the impurities in his body. Of course, the degree of cleansing was far inferior to his chaotic qi, but this was already extremely shocking to him. A treasure like marrow cleansing would cost an astronomical price in the outside world. 100 top-grade spirit stones was too cheap. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, Little sister, how many do you have? The little girl glanced at Yi Xian. What are you doing? She was very vigilant. Yi Xian smiled. How many do you have? I'll buy them for you, because this thing of yours is very good. The little girl shook her head slightly. It's very difficult to collect. It took me 10 days to collect just these few tubes. Yi Xian squatted down and said, "Then I'll take them all." After that, he took out 1,000 top-grade spirit stones and gave it to the little girl. The little girl was stunned. Then she hurriedly shook her head. "Only 400. Yi Xian smiled. "The value of this thing of yours is far more than 100 top-grade spirit stones. In the end, I'm the one who made the profit." The little girl glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, "Can you do me a favor?" Yi Xian was slightly stunned, and then he smiled. "What is it?" The little girl suddenly stood up, and then she pulled Yi Xian and ran not far away. Soon, she brought Yi Xian to a treehouse. An old man was lying in the treehouse. The old man's face was pale, and his breath was faintly discernible. Obviously, he was terminally ill. The little girl turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian pondered for a moment. Then he walked to the bedside. When he walked to the bedside, he suddenly smelled a foul smell. It was the smell of rotting flesh. Seeing this, Yi Xian frowned deeply. Beside him, the little girl raised her head and looked at him. Her eyes filled with a pleading look. "This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page." Yi Xian sighed softly. He took out a purple source pill and fed it to the old man. After taking the purple source pill, a stream of pure spiritual energy began to flow through the old man's body. Soon, the old man's face began to regain color. Seeing this, the little girl was wild with joy. Then, she hurriedly turned around and kowtowed to Yi Xian. Yi Xian pulled the little girl up. He rubbed the little girl's head and smiled. "Where are your parents?" The little girl slightly lowered her head. "They went outside with my brother." Yi Xian asked. "They didn't come back?" The little girl shook her head. "No." Hearing this, Yi Xian frowned. At this moment, the old man lying on the bed suddenly said, "Young man." Yi Xian turned to face the old man. The old man softly said, "This is a purple source pill, right?" Yi Xian was a little surprised. He did not expect the old man to know it. The old man looked at Yi Xian. "A purple source pill is much more precious than my old life. How could a young man like me, who is about to die, use it?" Yi Xian pointed at the little girl and smiled. Looking at her, "It's like looking at my little sister." The little girl glanced at Yi Xian and did not say anything. The old man softly said, "Compassion." Yi Xian smiled. "I still have things to do, so I'll be leaving first." After saying this, he was about to leave. At this moment, the old man suddenly said, "Young man, wait a moment." Yi Xian turned to face the old man. The old man looked at the little girl. This girl's parents left with her brother when she was 3 years old. She is a pitiful person. This old man will not live for long. As he said this, he looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian softly said, "The ancient Wu clan will take care of her, right?" The old man shook his head. "I don't want anything bad to happen to her." "Young man, you are willing to use a purple source pill on this old man. This proves that you are kind-hearted and a person with great love. If she follows you, she will not suffer." After saying this, he just looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then, he looked at the little girl. The little girl slightly lowered her head and pinched the corner of her skirt. No one knew what she was thinking. Yi Xian knew what the little girl was thinking, because he once knew what his sister was thinking. His sister's experience was not much different from this little girl's. Yi Xian walked to the little girl's side and smiled. "Are you willing to go with me?" The little girl looked up at Yi Xian. Her tears fell at once. However, she shook her head. I want to take care of Grandpa." At the side, the old man suddenly said, "Go with him." The little girl looked at the old man. The old man slowly closed his eyes. "Girl, this might be the only time you can change your fate. As for Grandpa, Grandpa is not important. You just need to come back and see Grandpa in the future. That will be enough." The little girl still wanted to say something, but the old man shook his head. "If you are not obedient, Grandpa will immediately die in front of you." The little girl's tears flowed continuously. She just looked at the old man. The old man waved at Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked to the bedside. The old man took out a pitch-black scroll and handed it to Yi Xian. "This was left by our ancestors. It has been passed down from generation to generation in my family. As for its use, We haven't been able to figure it out. Take it. Yi Xian glanced at the scroll. He hesitated for a moment before keeping the scroll. Then he walked to the little girl. Let's go. The little girl suddenly placed the 1,000 top-grade spirit stones that Yi Xian gave her by the old man's bedside. Then, she turned around and walked to Yi Xian's side. She wanted to pull Yi Xian's arm, but she hesitated. Yi Xian took the initiative to pull her hand and walked out of the treehouse. Outside the treehouse, Yi Xian smiled and asked, "What's your name?" The little girl said softly, "Wei Yang Tian." Yi Xian was a little surprised. "Who gave it to you?" The little girl said softly, "I don't know." At this point, she paused slightly and looked up at Yi Xian. "Is it not nice?" Yi Xian smiled. "It's nice." At this moment, the little girl hesitated and wanted to say something. Yi Xian asked with a smile, "What's wrong?" The little girl pointed at Yi Xian's abdomen. "That pagoda is dangerous." Yi Xian was stunned. End of this chapter. Chapter 296. Yi Xian was completely stunned, because he really did not expect this little girl to know that there was a pagoda in his body. Up until now, among all the powerhouses he met in the Azure Firmament world, even the middle-aged man at the bottom of the abyss where he obtained the spatial Tao Law, none of them had discovered that there was a pagoda in his body. How did this little girl discover it? Yi Xian squatted down and held the little girl's hand, asking seriously, "How did you discover that there is a pagoda in Big Brother's body?" Wei Yang Tian said softly, "I saw it. I saw it." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "How did you see it?" Wei Yang Tendo said, "I saw it." Yi Xian smiled. "Then what else can you see?" Wei Yang Tian looked at Yi Xian. She was a little hesitant. Yi Xian smiled. "It's okay, just say it." Wei Yang Tian glanced at Yi Xian's abdomen and said softly, "There is a dangerous person in the pagoda." Yi Xian said softly, "You can see the person in the pagoda?" Wei Yang Tian nodded. Yi Xian fell silent. This matter was a little complicated. Originally, he thought this little girl was just an ordinary little girl. But now it seemed that things were not that simple. This was not an ordinary little girl at all. At this time, Wei Yang Tian suddenly said, "Big brother, I said something wrong?" Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. "You're not wrong." As he said, he gently rubbed Wei Yang Tian's little head. "What do you plan to do in the future?" Wei Yang Tian looked up at Yi Xian, her eyes filled with determination. "Cultivate. Cultivate." Yi Xian smiled. "Why cultivate?" Wei Yang Tian clenched her fists, her eyes suddenly turning red. Yi Xian said softly, "Don't cry. Since you want to cultivate, then Big Brother will help you. However, you have to promise me, no matter how strong you are in the future, you are not to mess around, understand?" His intuition told him that this little girl's future achievements might not be low. If this kind of person lost hope in the world from a young age and became extreme in character, it would be a disaster for the world if she became powerful in the future. Wei Yang Tian held onto Yi Xian's hand tightly. "I won't hurt Big Brother." Yi Xian smiled and said, "All right, let's go find a place to rest first." After saying so, he pulled Endless Sky away. An hour later, Yi Xian found an unoccupied treehouse. Inside the treehouse, he cooked some food. When Wei Yang Tian saw the food, she immediately started drooling. She just stared at it eagerly. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Hurry up and eat." Hearing this, unending heaven immediately started sweeping the area. Yi Xian suddenly felt his heart ache when he saw endless heaven, wiping out the monsters in a frenzy. Because the little lass before him must have suffered a lot. Just like his younger sister, Yi Ling. When he hadn't grown up, the two of them never had a meal. Sometimes they didn't even have a meal a day. At many times, the world was as cruel as it could be. But if a person didn't work hard, then the world would forever be cruel to that person. Meanwhile, Endless Sky seemed to have thought of something, and she suddenly raised her head to look at Yi Xian. Aren't you going to eat?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Yes, let's eat together." As soon as he finished speaking, he started eating as well. A wisp of a smile instantly appeared on Endless Sky's face. Just like that, It didn't take long for the two of them to finish the table. After he finished cleaning up, Yi Xian took out Endless Sky. This chapter isn't finished, please keep going. He opened the scroll the Lord had given him. There were some strange talismans on the scroll. He couldn't understand them at all. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he tapped it with his finger. A drop of blood essence fell onto the scroll. However, there was no reaction at all. What's this? Yi Xian frowned. It wouldn't be just an ordinary piece of skin, right? Right at this moment, Endless Sky suddenly said, "Big brother, it's a map." A map? Yi Xian faced Endless Sky. How do you know it's a map? Wei Yang Tian pointed at the scroll. I can read it. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Then why didn't you tell your grandfather and the others? Endless Sky shook her head. Grandfather and the others are too weak. If I told them, then it might kill them. But Big Brother is different. Big Brother is very strong. Yi Xian sighed with emotion in his heart, and then he rubbed Endless Sky's head lightly. What a thoughtful little girl. Earlier, he'd sensed the old man's aura in the treehouse, and it wasn't weak at all. It was a technique control realm expert. Unfortunately, the old man was at the end of his life. Just as Endless Sky had said, if she told the old man the truth, then it was very likely that she would harm the old man instead. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, Do you know how to get there? Endless Sky nodded. You can follow this route. Big brother, do you want to go? Yi Xian smiled. Will it be dangerous? Endless Sky shook her head. Big brother is very strong, so there shouldn't be any danger. Yi Xian smiled. Then let's go. As he spoke, he pulled Endless Sky along with him, and left the treehouse. It didn't take long for them to enter a boundless mountain range. All along the way, Endless Sky held tightly onto Yi Xian's hand, and she would glance at Yi Xian from time to time. However, she would quickly withdraw her gaze when Yi Xian looked at her. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Why do you keep peeping at me? Endless Sky spoke softly. Big brother is a good person. Yi Xian smiled. It's very difficult to distinguish between a good person and a bad person at most times. For example, Big brother is a good person to you, but it's very likely that he's a bad person to others, a super bad person. Endless Sky glanced at Yi Xian, and then she lowered her head slightly. In any case, Big brother is a good person. Yi Xian smiled as he rubbed Endless Sky's little head, and then he didn't say anything else. In fact, for Yi Xian, most of the time, he really sympathized with those at the bottom. Because he had climbed his way up from the bottom, he knew very well how helpless a person without strength was most of the time. It was even despair. So, when he saw Endless Sky, he practically didn't hesitate to choose to help her. And he didn't have any ulterior motives in doing so. However, Yi Xian didn't know that the reason Endless Sky trusted him so much was because she'd seen through this. Around 2 hours later, Yi Xian and Endless Sky entered a gorge. The gorge was very large, and the mountains on both sides towered into the clouds. After entering the gorge, a feeling of insignificance arose involuntarily in their hearts. Meanwhile, Endless Sky stopped. She opened the scroll, and after reading it for a long time, she glanced at the surroundings. In the end, she looked at a mountain wall on her right. There? Yi Xian asked. Endless Sky pointed at the mountain wall in the distance. If one looked carefully, one would notice a crack on the mountain wall. This crack seemed like a natural crack, and there was nothing special about it at first glance. Yi Xian grabbed Endless Sky's hand and flew up on his sword. Endless Sky hurriedly hugged Yi Xian, and she pressed her head tightly against Yi Xian's chest in slight fear. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive at the crack, and there was a stone door not too far away from him. Yi Xian pulled Endless Sky over, and then he pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. A ray of light shot out violently. Chi! The stone door split right down the middle. Behind the stone door, there was a huge gust of wind. Please continue to the next page. There was a grotto heaven. It really was a map. Yi Xian pulled Endless Sky through the stone door, and the two of them walked down the stone steps. In no time, they arrived before a pool, and in the middle of the pool floated a coffin. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings, and it was completely silent. There was no sound at all. In the end, Yi Xian faced the coffin in the distant pool. He was about to walk over when Endless Sky suddenly grabbed his hand and shook her head. She pointed at the bottom of the pool and said, "There's something. There's something." Yi Xian unleashed his divine consciousness. However, as soon as his divine consciousness entered the pool, it immediately disappeared without a trace. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression became slightly solemn. Not simple. After a moment's hesitation, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait here. Are you afraid?" Endless Sky hurriedly nodded, but it didn't take long for her to shake her head. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Don't be afraid. Even if something happens, the existence down there will definitely come looking for me first." As soon as he finished speaking, he rubbed Endless Sky's little head lightly, and then he floated towards the coffin. This time, he'd utilize chaotic energy. At this moment his aura was completely devoid, and it was like he didn't exist at all. In next to no time, Yi Xian arrived above the coffin. The coffin was covered in all sorts of strange violet talismans, and they covered the entire coffin. Besides that, there were numerous black threads around the coffin, and they were like a black net that covered the entire coffin. What's this? Yi Xian's brows knit together tightly. His intuition told him that the existence here might not be a benevolent being. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he looked at Endless Sky and said, "Can you see through it?" Endless Sky shook her head. "Something's blocking it." Something. Yi Xian faced the coffin beneath him. Needless to say, it was probably because of the talismans and black threads. Because he noticed that his divine sense would vanish without a trace the moment it came into contact with the coffin. "Can't I open it?" Yi Xian was in a slightly difficult position. At this moment, his intuition told him that the existence within this coffin was definitely not a benevolent being, and he might be in great trouble if he opened it. But the problem was, how could he be willing to leave now? He wasn't willing at all. Above the coffin, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he decided to open it in the end. Fortune came from danger. Of course, it was mainly because he was confident in his own strength. Currently, he would even be able to fight an expert at the true imperial magic realm. Yi Xian tapped with his finger, and a strand of sword light slashed directly onto the surface of the coffin. The talismans and black threads on the coffin actually started to crack inch by inch, and it didn't take long for them to actually vanish slowly. After the talismans and black threads disappeared, Yi Xian took a deep breath, and then he started to slowly open the coffin's lid. Soon, the coffin's lid was opened, and there was a woman lying in the coffin. A woman in a bright red dress. The woman's face was pale, and she had on alluring makeup. Her appearance was peerless and very beautiful. A woman. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he bent down. At this moment, the woman suddenly opened her eyes. Yi Xian was immediately petrified in the air. At this moment, the silence seemed to have frozen. P.S. Happy New Year to everyone again. Thank you for your company all these years. When I first entered this industry, I didn't expect to persist until now. It's because of everyone's genuine subscriptions that I have food to eat and the motivation to write. Thank you all. Thank you all. End of this chapter. Chapter 297. Inside the coffin, the lady in red just stared at Yi Xian. There was not a trace of emotion in her eyes. After a while, Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. Sorry for the interruption. Sorry for the interruption. After saying that, he was about to close the coffin lid. At this moment, the lady in red suddenly extended her right hand to block the coffin lid. At the same time, a blood-red glow enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. His figure shuddered, and he retreated to Wei Yangtian's side. Wei Yangtian quickly grabbed Yi Xian's arm and held it tightly. Yi Xian looked at the coffin above the pool in the distance. Inside the coffin, the lady in red slowly floated up. Her red dress was very long, and it looked a little like a wedding dress. In the air, the lady in red looked down at Yi Xian, her eyes filled with coldness. Yi Xian gripped his sword tightly in his right hand, and he quickly said inwardly, "Second floor guru. Do you want to come out and perform?" The Almighty on the second floor sneered and didn't respond. This was the sound of gloating. Yi Xian's face darkened. This second-floor guru was too unreliable. At this moment, the lady in red suddenly floated in front of him and Wei Yongtian. She looked down at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. Congratulations, senior. You don't have to thank me. My greatest weakness is that I like to help others. Of course, if senior wants to thank me, you can just give me any heaven-grade treasure. The lady in red suddenly slammed her palm down, and Yi Xian's expression changed. He quickly pulled Wei Yongtian behind him, and then he stabbed out with his sword. Facing this mysterious lady, Yi Xian naturally did not dare to be careless. He immediately executed the single sword determines life and death. Not only that, but he also enhanced it with the evil thought sword intent. The sword struck out. Boom! Yi Xian was directly shaken to the point of retreating explosively, and only when he retreated in front of the mountain wall did he forcefully stop. After Yi Xian stopped, a trickle of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He raised his head and looked at the woman in red who was not far away. This woman was so strong. In the air, the woman in red glanced at Yi Xian. In the next moment, she suddenly waved her right hand lightly at Yi Xian. In an instant, a stream of water suddenly floated up from the pool beneath her. The stream of water was like an arrow that had been released from a bow as it shot towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian took a quick step forward and slashed with his sword with both hands. Boom! Yi Xian's sword forcefully shattered the water arrow. At this time, a red shadow suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Without thinking, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. Bang! A figure flew out in an instant. The person who flew out was none other than Yi Xian. As soon as Yi Xian landed, Wei Yongtian hurriedly ran to his side and hugged his arm tightly. His eyes were filled with anxiety. In the distance, the woman in red was about to attack again when Yi Xian suddenly stood up. Wait! The woman in red stopped and looked at Yi Xian, as if waiting for Yi Xian's reply. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Your Excellency, I rescued you, but you want to kill me. Don't you think this is too much? The woman in red was expressionless. Did I ask you to rescue me? Yi Xian. The woman in red shook her head. I didn't ask you to rescue me. As soon as she finished speaking, her lily-white hand suddenly pointed at Yi Xian from afar. In an instant, the space where Yi Xian was directly turned blood-red. What kind of technique was this? Yi Xian's expression changed. He didn't dare act carelessly, and he suddenly clenched his right hand tightly. Cage. As soon as he spoke, the space where he and Wei Yongtian were shrunk, and then a small spatial cage was formed. The blood-red energy was completely unable to approach Yi Xian and Wei Yongtian. Wei Yongtian. The woman in red's beautiful brows knit together slightly. What technique is this? Yi Xian pulled Wei Yongtian behind him, and then he thought for a moment before he said, Spatial divine ability. The woman in red sized Yi Xian up. You can leave now. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, You're not fighting anymore. The woman's face was expressionless. You can fight if you want. Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. No, I don't want to fight. As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled Wei Yongtian along as he turned around and left. Meanwhile, the woman in red suddenly said, How did you find this place? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he withdrew the map. The woman glanced at the map, and then her eyes narrowed slightly. It was him. As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian. You're his descendant? Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. No, I only obtained this map by chance. The woman gazed at Yi Xian for a long time. Help me do something. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he asked. What is it? The woman looked Yi Xian in the eyes. Give me a child. Child? Yi Xian was stunned. In the next moment he suddenly leaped up. No. How can I do that? No. I, Yi Xian, am not that kind of person. The woman suddenly spoke angrily. What are you thinking? I'm asking you to find me a child. Yi Xian's lips twitched. Then speak clearly. The woman in red stared at Yi Xian with an unfriendly expression. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, why do you want a child? The woman in red coldly said. This has nothing to do with you. Yi Xian shook his head. Then I can't find one for senior. The woman's eyes gradually turned cold. Do you want to die? Yi Xian sternly said. Senior, Do you know who I am? Without waiting for the woman to reply, he continued. I'm the next sect leader candidate of Pale Sword Sect. Have you heard of Pale Sword Sect? If not, then have you heard of the Pale World Sword Master? The woman in red calmly said. Why? Are you threatening me? Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. No. I just want to tell Senior that if anything happens to me, my Pale Sword Sect will definitely not let it go. The woman in red was expressionless. Do you think I'm afraid of your Pale Sword Sect? Yi Xian sternly said. Senior, there's no need for us to be in such a deadlock. Tell me, why are you looking for a child? The woman in red looked at Yi Xian for a long time. Then she said, I want to leave this world. I hope someone can inherit my ancient shaman secret technique. Yi Xian hurriedly pointed at himself. Me. Senior, I have extraordinary talent. You have to pass down all your abilities to me. Wei Yongtian glanced at Yi Xian. Then she covered her mouth and laughed. The woman in red's eyes twitched. How can you be so shameless? Yi Xian sternly said, Senior, I'm not joking. I really can do it. If you pass it down to me, then I won't disgrace Senior's abilities. The woman in red waved her hand. My inheritance can only be given to women. Yi Xian was stunned. In the next moment, he revealed a slightly vigilant expression. He was extremely vigilant. He hurriedly pulled Wei Yongtian behind him. The atmosphere here had become slightly heavy. The woman glanced at Yi Xian, and then she gazed at Wei Yongtian. Are you willing to take me as your master? Wei Yongtian was stunned, and then she gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's face was extremely gloomy. This woman's target from the beginning might have been Wei Yongtian, because if she really wanted to find an heir, then she could just leave and look for one in the outside world. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Why did Senior take a liking to her? The woman in red spoke indifferently. Is it related to you? Yi Xian pulled Wei Yongtian along as he turned around and left. Stop right there. Right at this moment the woman spoke coldly. Do you want to die? Yi Xian turned around and laughed coldly. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian took a step forward. In an instant, a sword floated in his palm. At the same time, a powerful pressure swept out from within him. The might of the Sword Emperor. The woman in red laughed coldly. A mere Sword Emperor dares to act arrogantly before me? As she spoke, she was about to attack. Meanwhile, Wei Yongtian, who stood by Yi Xian's side, spoke abruptly. I'm willing to learn from you. The woman in red stopped and gazed at Wei Yongtian. Really? Wei Yongtian nodded slightly. But you can't harm Big Brother. The woman in red glanced at Yi Xian. This fellow has a glib tongue, and his skin is thicker than a city wall. You'll learn bad things from him sooner or later. Wei Yongtian shook her head. Big Brother is a good person. The woman in red glanced at Yi Xian. He doesn't seem like a good person. Yi Xian was speechless. Just like that, Wei Yongtian started to learn from the woman in red. Meanwhile, Yi Xian didn't leave because he couldn't stop worrying about Wei Yongtian. The woman in red didn't seem like a good person to him. Actually, she didn't seem like a good person to him either. However, there was no need to doubt the strength of this woman in red. After a day or two, he noticed that the woman in red was sincerely teaching Wei Yongtian. Moreover, Wei Yongtian's ability to learn things could be described as terrifying. Extremely terrifying. Because she learned everything in a short time. Even the woman in red was extremely shocked by this. However, she was mostly happy. Just like that, a few days passed. On this day, the woman in red suddenly called Yi Xian over. Wei Yongtian hurriedly grabbed Yi Xian's hand when she saw him. And then she spoke excitedly. Big Brother, look. As she spoke, she pressed down lightly towards the pool of water in the distance. It didn't take long for a vortex to form there. That wasn't the end of it. She gestured lightly with her fair hand, and the water in the pool actually floated up slowly before it formed into the shape of a person. It was exactly Yi Xian's appearance. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he shook his head and smiled. Amazing! Wei Yongtian grew even more excited when she received Yi Xian's praise. Meanwhile, the woman in red suddenly said, Little girl, Go meditate and comprehend what I just taught you. Wei Yongtian nodded, and then she ran over and sat down cross-legged. After she sent Wei Yongtian away, the woman in red looked at Yi Xian. Do you know her true origins? Yi Xian shook his head. The woman in red frowned deeply. After a short moment, she glanced at the nearby Wei Yongtian. She's no ordinary person. Yi Xian nodded. I know. The woman in red looked at Yi Xian. I want her to become the clan leader of the Guwu clan. Yi Xian shook his head decisively. No. The woman in red spoke coldly. Why not? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. I don't want her to be swept into that vortex of power. The woman in red fell silent for a moment, and then she said, It's just a matter of a word from me. Yi Xian gazed at the woman in red. Who are you? The woman in red glanced at Yi Xian. I founded the Guwu clan. Who do you think I am? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly bowed. Greetings, big boss. Chapter 298. Needless to say, Yi Xian was still quite shocked at this moment, because he hadn't expected that the woman before him was actually the founder of the ancient Wu clan. The woman glanced at Wei Yongtian, and then she said softly, Her cultivation speed and learning ability aren't something an ordinary person should have. But I can't see through her. When she spoke up to this point, she looked at Yi Xian. It's like I can't see through you. Yi Xian smiled. Why can't I see through you? The woman took a deep look at Yi Xian, but she didn't say anything. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Senior, I'm curious about something. Why did you imprison yourself in a coffin? The woman's face was expressionless. I was imprisoned. Yi Xian furrowed his brows. With your strength, the woman glanced at Yi Xian. Usually, it isn't your enemies that can hurt you, but the people you trust the most. Yi Xian fell silent. There was no doubt that the woman before him had been betrayed by the people closest to her. The woman tapped with her finger, and a pitch-black ring flew to Yi Xian. This is the ring of the ancient Wu clan's clan leader. Take her to the ancient Wu clan, and they'll naturally know what to do. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Senior, forgive me for being blunt, but it's not very realistic to ask the ancient Wu clan to acknowledge her as their clan leader just because of a ring. The woman spoke indifferently. Take her there and give it a try, and you'll know. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he nodded. Let's give it a try. As he spoke, he chuckled. Senior, do you have anything you don't want, like a heaven-grade spirit artifact? If you do, give it to me. The woman glanced coldly at Yi Xian. Are you really a swordsman? Yi Xian was speechless. The woman spoke again. Don't even think about it. How could I possibly have those rubbish things? As for those that are too precious, they won't give them to you. Yi Xian's face twitched. If there's nothing, then there's nothing. What's the big deal? 2 days later, Yi Xian prepared to leave with Endless Sky. Inside the cave, Wei Yongtian bowed to the woman in red. Master, aren't you coming with us? The woman in red was about to speak when her expression suddenly changed. This was because she discovered that at least 100 years of her lifespan had been lost in an instant. 100 years of life. As if she thought of something, she looked at Endless Sky with an extremely solemn expression. Just now this girl had bowed to her. Then, her 100 years of lifespan was gone. The red-clothed woman took a deep glance at Wei Yongtian, and then she said, I have other matters to attend to, so I can't leave with all of you. Hearing that, Wei Yongtian's expression dimmed slightly. Over the past few days, she had developed a good impression of the woman in red. The red-clothed woman tapped with her finger. An array of red light suddenly entered the center of Wei Yongtian's forehead. She was stunned for quite a while, and then she gazed at the red-clothed woman. Master, what's this? The red-clothed woman said, A treasure I left for you. You'll be able to withdraw it once you attain the true control realm. When she spoke up to hear, she glanced at Yi Xian, and seemed to be slightly warning him. Yi Xian had an emotionless expression on his face. Don't worry, Senior. I won't have any designs on this precious little girl. The red-clothed woman gazed at Wei Yongtian. You have to be vigilant against everyone. Understand? Wei Yongtian nodded. Besides Big Brother. Yi Xian chuckled and was extremely happy. The red-clothed woman glanced coldly at Yi Xian. I'll leave this little girl to you. Treat her well. And it'll definitely be boundlessly beneficial to you in the future. Yi Xian pulled Wei Yongtian back and said, Senior, if there's nothing else, then we'll be leaving. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around with Wei Yongtian. This chapter isn't finished, please continue. They left. When they arrived at the door, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something, and he stopped abruptly before he turned around to face the red-clothed woman. Senior, can you do me a small favor? Just a small favor. The red-clothed woman glanced at Yi Xian and didn't speak a word. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. I've been unhappy with that Exalt Lu from the Realm Defense Alliance for a very long time. Senior, can you help me beat him up? The red-clothed woman still didn't speak. Yi Xian shrugged, and then he pulled Wei Yongtian along and left the cave. Outside the cave, Yi Xian shot into the sky on his sword while Wei Yongtian held him tightly behind him. At this moment, she wasn't as afraid as she had been before, and she was slightly excited instead. Within the cave, the red-clothed woman remained silent for a very long time. And then she spoke softly. Exactly what sort of existence is this little girl? A short moment later, the red-clothed woman swept the cave with her gaze, and her expression gradually turned gloomy. This matter isn't over even if you run off to the boundless starry sky. As soon as she finished speaking, her entire body disappeared. The red-clothed woman didn't leave the firmament world. Instead, she went to the Realm Defense Mountain. As soon as the red-clothed woman arrived at the Realm Defense Mountain, a middle-aged man appeared in front of her. This person was the Realm Defense Alliance's Exalt Lu. Exalt Lu stared at the red-clothed woman with a trace of fear in his eyes. The red-clothed woman glanced at Exalt Lu and said indifferently, You're Exalt Lu? Exalt Lu nodded slightly. You are? The red-clothed woman didn't answer, and instead raised her hand to press down on Exalt Lu. With this press, the space where Exalt Lu was instantly distorted into a strange arc. Seeing that the red-clothed woman had attacked without a second word, Exalt Lu's expression instantly turned cold, and he pressed down with his right hand. Boom! A powerful force vibrated from his palm, and the space around him instantly rippled like water. At this moment, the red-clothed woman suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Exalt Lu's expression changed drastically, and he punched forward. Bang! Along with a shocking explosion, Exalt Lu was instantly pushed over 1 kilometer back, and when he stopped moving, the space behind him had actually cracked apart. Space had been shattered. Exalt Lu stared fixedly at the red-clothed woman. Who exactly are you? Why have you come to my Realm Defense Alliance? The red-clothed woman glanced at Exalt Lu. I was asked by someone to come and beat you up. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly pressed her palms together, and then she suddenly slashed forward. Hiss! The space in front of the red-clothed woman split apart layer by layer, and a powerful force tore through everything as it headed straight for Exalt Lu. Exalt Lu's pupils constricted slightly, and he didn't dare act carelessly. He waved his right hand, and a powerful aura swept out from his arm. At the same time, he took a step forward and pointed forward with his finger. A strange vortex formed in space where his finger descended. A moment of silence ensued. Bang! An enormous bang that shook the heavens resounded in the sky, and then a figure retreated explosively by over a kilometer. It was Exalt Lu. At this moment, blood was flowing slowly from the corners of Exalt Lu's mouth. Exalt Lu stared fixedly at the red-clothed woman. Who asked you to do this? The red-clothed woman's face was expressionless. His name is Yi Xian. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and vanished into the horizon. Exalt Lu's expression was extremely unsightly, and a moment later, a furious howl suddenly resounded through the sky. Exalt Lu hated Yi Xian to the bone. He'd already had a way to deal with the mysterious woman and eliminate Yi Xian. But now, the Pale Sword sect was protecting Yi Xian. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Most importantly, with the terrifying speed of Yi Xian's growth, it wouldn't be long before Yi Xian became a sword immortal. At that time, it would be even more difficult to eliminate him. Exalt Lu's expression grew even gloomier when he thought of this. A short while later, Exalt Lu turned around and returned to the hall. And then he closed his eyes slowly. How long more until our people arrive? A voice resounded from a dark corner. 10 days at most. Exalt Lu asked again. How long more until the matter at Azure Prefecture? The voice said again. It will take another 10 days or so. Exalt Lu fell silent for a moment. And then he said, We'll obtain the quintessence heart of Azure Prefecture first, then eliminate the Pale Sword sect in Yixian. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Yixian brought Wei Yongtian back to the ancient Wu clan, and he brought Wei Yongtian to the treehouse where the Wu clan's patriarch resided. Within the treehouse, the Wu clan's patriarch glanced at Yixian. What's the matter? Yixian nodded, and then he withdrew the ring that the red-clothed woman had given him. When he saw the ring, the Wu clan's patriarch instantly seemed as if he'd been struck by lightning, and his entire body stiffened on the spot. A short moment later, the Wu clan's patriarch gazed at Yixian. Where did you get this? Yixian gave the ring to Wei Yongtian and said, A senior left it to this little girl. Moreover, that senior even passed down his entire inheritance to this little girl. The Wu clan's patriarch gazed at Wei Yongtian when he heard Yixian. Wei Yongtian held tightly onto Yixian's hand, and she was looking at the Wu clan's patriarch as well. A short while later, the Wu clan's patriarch spoke abruptly, Gather all the elders. It didn't take long for around 10 people to appear within the treehouse. Among these 10 people, there were actually 7 true defensive Dharma realm experts. Yixian was instantly quite shocked when he witnessed this scene. Needless to say, he'd slightly underestimated the Wu clan's strength. The Wu clan's patriarch glanced at Yixian. We have something to discuss. Yixian was just about to speak when Wei Yongtian held tightly onto his arm. When she saw this, the Wu clan's patriarch spoke in a low voice. Then stay. As soon as she finished speaking, she glanced at the others. Tell me what all of you think. It didn't take long for them to start discussing, and they frequently glanced at Wei Yongtian, while their eyes were filled with curiosity. Around 2 hours later, the Wu clan's patriarch walked over to Yixian. We've decided to make her the junior patriarch of the Wu clan. Once she comes of age, we'll make her the patriarch of the Wu clan. Yixian faced Wei Yongtian. Wei Yongtian's tears instantly flowed from her eyes, and she just gazed at Yixian. Yixian hurriedly squatted down. Why are you crying all of a sudden? Wei Yongtian wiped off the tears on her face and didn't speak. Yixian smiled. You think that I don't want you anymore, right? Wei Yongtian nodded. Yixian smiled. If you really don't want to stay here, then you can leave with me. No. The Wu clan's patriarch suddenly said. She can't leave with you. Yixian faced the Wu clan's patriarch, and the latter spoke in a low voice. Although she has obtained the inheritance of her ancestors, she hasn't fully absorbed it. If she leaves with you, you're a swordsman, so you won't be of any help to her cultivation. As she spoke, she looked at Wei Yongtian. You'll become even stronger if you stay here. Wei Yongtian was about to refuse when the Wu clan's patriarch suddenly pointed at Yixian. He can stay with the Wu clan as well. Wei Yongtian instantly hesitated when she heard this. Just then, a man suddenly walked in and bowed slightly to the Wu clan's patriarch. Patriarch, the Realm Defense Alliance has sent someone. The Realm Defense Alliance. Yixian frowned deeply when he heard this. End of this chapter. Chapter 299. Inside the hall, the atmosphere was quite solemn. After a moment, the Wu clan patriarch suddenly said, Invite him in. Soon an old man walked in. This person was none other than Emoshio. After Emoshio entered the treehouse, his gaze directly fell on Yixian. Yixian grinned. Grand Elder Emoshio, I haven't seen you for a few days. How have you been? Emoshio said indifferently. I'm very good, I just don't know how you are. Yixian laughed. I'm very good, very, very good. Emoshio's face was expressionless. I wonder if you have considered the matter I spoke of that day. Matter? Yi Xian was stunned, and then said, What matter? Emoshio's eyes narrowed. It seems that you haven't considered it. Yi Xian suddenly understood. You want me to go to the Realm Defense Alliance to do the young Exalt Lord's matter? Everyone. Emoshio stared fixedly at Yi Xian, not speaking. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. Elder Mo, I won't argue with you. Let's be honest. Even if I join the Realm Defense Alliance, will your Realm Defense Alliance really trust me? You won't. For an outstanding person like me, your Realm Defense Alliance will only feel at ease if you kill me, right? Emoshio stared at Yi Xian for a long time, and then said, What are you talking about? So long as you sincerely join my Realm Defense Alliance, my Realm Defense Alliance will definitely treat you well. Yi Xian laughed. Like hell I'll believe you, you old man, you're very bad. Emoshio said indifferently, Since it's like this, then the old man won't say anything. As he spoke, he turned to look at the nearby Gu Wu clan patriarch. Gu clan patriarch, you should already be aware of the old man's purpose for coming this time. The Blue Sword sect has committed countless crimes and committed many unjust acts. Stop. Yi Xian suddenly interrupted Emoshio. Elder Mo, you have to speak with a conscience. How is my Blue Sword sect guilty of so many crimes? As he spoke, he walked in front of Emoshio. I feel that if we are talking about evil, who in this Azure Firmament world can compare to your Realm Defense Alliance? How many people were there in the Kanglan province? How many living beings were there? How did they all die? They were all killed by your Realm Defense Alliance. Don't you have any idea what the current situation is in the Green Province? Emoshio glared at Yi Xian. You're courting death. As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack. Yi Xian was fearless. He opened his right hand, and a sword appeared in his palm. Right at this moment, the nearby Gu Wu clan's patriarch suddenly said, Wait! Emoshio stopped and looked at the Gu Wu clan patriarch. The latter spoke in a low voice. Both of you, this is not the Realm Defense Alliance, nor is it the Blue Sword sect. Yi Xian smiled and said, Understood. As he spoke, he retreated to the side. Meanwhile, Emoshio suddenly said, Gu Clan Patriarch, my Realm Defense Alliance sincerely invites the Gu Wu clan to form an alliance with us. Towards this, we're very sincere. Not only have we found a treasured land with abundant spirit energy for all of you, we've even provided you with a jade-grade spirit vein. For the next few decades, your Gu Wu clan will have no worries about spirit energy. When they heard this, the expressions of the Gu Wu clan and the others within the treehouse were slightly moved. Presently, the biggest problem the Gu Wu clan faced was that the spirit energy in the area they resided in was starting to dry up. This was also the reason why they'd sought out the Blue Sword sect. It was because they hoped to be able to leave this mountain and find a new treasured land. Yet now, the Realm Defense Alliance had directly obtained what they needed. At the side, Yi Xian's expression sank. Meanwhile, Emoshio said, Everyone besides the Gu Wu clan, there are many other powers and aristocratic families in the firmament world that have clearly expressed their support for my Realm Defense Alliance. Even though my Realm Defense Alliance is somewhat ambitious, but the old man guarantees that my Realm Defense Alliance absolutely has the heart to accept others. The firmament world is too big, and it can accommodate many people. Of course. When he spoke up to hear, he glanced coldly at the nearby Yi Xian and said, Of course, there are some people that my Realm Defense Alliance absolutely can't tolerate. Yi Xian smiled, and then he turned to the Gu Wu clan patriarch and said, Gu clan patriarch, since Elder Mo has spoken openly, then I won't say anything more. Gu clan patriarch and the other elders, please make the decision. The Gu Wu clan patriarch glanced at Yi Xian, and then she looked at Emoshio and said, Elder Mo, where exactly is this treasure you speak of? Emoshio smiled and said, South Mountain. It was originally the property of my Realm Defense Alliance, and there is a jade-grade spirit vein beneath it. The Gu Wu clan can go there after they leave. Besides that, the Gu Wu clan's future matters are my Realm Defense Alliance's matters. In the treehouse, All the elders of the Guwu clan discussed animatedly. After a short moment, the Guwu clan patriarch said in a low voice, "Is what Elder Emo said true?" Emoshio smiled and said, "Of course. However, I have a small condition." When he spoke up to hear, he glanced at Yi Xian and said, "This person is a great enemy of my Realm Defense Alliance. Now that he's here, the old man would like to invite everyone to join me in capturing this person. This shouldn't be a problem, right?" When she heard Emoshio, Wei Yongtian hurriedly walked over to stand by Yi Xian's side, and she stared fixedly at Emoshio with a hostile expression. The Guwu clan patriarch had a rather troubled expression when she witnessed this scene. Kill Yi Xian. That represented that he'd truly broken off all relations with the Firmament Sword sect. It wasn't just a break-off. It was the type that would become mortal enemies. The atmosphere in the treehouse suddenly became heavy. Yi Xian smiled and didn't speak. Meanwhile, Emoshio suddenly said, "What? Could it be that Patriarch Gu has other thoughts?" The Guwu clan patriarch's expression was extremely gloomy. She naturally understood that Emoshio wanted her to make a stand. If one wanted to obtain benefits, then one naturally had to pay a price. After a short moment of silence, an elder of the Guwu clan spoke abruptly. "Patriarch, make a decision." The other elders of the Guwu clan nodded successively. Obviously, they'd come to an extremely tacit decision. A short moment later, the Guwu clan patriarch gazed at Wei Yongtian, who stood by Yi Xian's side. "Come here." Wei Yongtian shook her head, and she just grabbed tightly onto Yi Xian. Even though she was young, she actually understood the current situation. Just like that, around a short moment later, the Guwu clan patriarch suddenly spoke in a low voice. "Don't harm that little girl. She's extremely useful to my Guwu clan." As soon as he finished speaking, a few elders of the Guwu clan suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian. All of them were true Imperial Realm experts. Obviously, they'd already made their decision. Emoshio instantly started laughing when he heard the Guwu clan patriarch, and then he gazed at Yi Xian. "See that, Yi Xian? So long as my Realm Defense Alliance is willing, then any power in the firmament world is willing to become our ally." As he spoke, he gazed at the nearby Guwu clan patriarch. "Patriarch Gu, thank you for your trouble." The Gu clan patriarch glanced at Yi Xian. "Compared to the Firmament Sword sect, I'm more willing to stand on the Realm Defense Alliance's side." As soon as she finished speaking, she was about to attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly spoke softly. "Patriarch Gu, you have to consider it carefully." The Gu clan patriarch's expression gradually turned icy cold. "I've already considered it very clearly. Kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, over 10 formidable auras suddenly enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned, and then he turned around and bowed slightly towards the area outside the treehouse. "Senior, I'm right. A dead person is like an extinguished lamp. Your ring isn't of any use at all." As soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, a woman in a red dress walked in slowly from outside the treehouse. "P.S. During the new year, there's 3 updates every day. Hurry up and praise me. Quickly praise me. Praise me for being handsome." Chapter 300. In fact, the woman in red didn't want to come to the ancient Wu clan. However, Yi Xian had strongly urged her to stay because he was afraid that things would change. His worry was not wrong. After the woman in red appeared, the expressions of the ancient Wu clan members changed, because there was a portrait on the wall of the treehouse, and this portrait was the appearance of the woman in red. The ancient Wu clan patriarch looked at the woman in red in horror. "You!" The woman in red raised her hand and pressed down. Bang! A powerful pressure directly enveloped the ancient Wu clan patriarch, and in an instant, the latter directly knelt down. In the treehouse, the expressions of the other ancient Wu clan elders changed greatly, and some of them were actually about to attack. At this moment, the ancient Wu clan patriarch suddenly said angrily, "Stop!" Everyone looked at the ancient Wu clan patriarch, and the latter bowed deeply to the woman in red. "Greetings, ancestor." "Ancestor." In the treehouse, everyone was dumbstruck. Emotio also had a look of disbelief on his face. The woman in red walked to the ancient Wu clan patriarch, and she looked down at the ancient Wu clan patriarch. You are so blind. How did you become the patriarch of the ancient Wu clan? The ancient Wu clan patriarch bowed his head slightly, and didn't dare to speak. The woman in red glanced at everyone in the treehouse. Is the so-called treasure land so important? Does the ancient Wu clan need charity from others? Why, after so many years, has the ancient Wu clan become more and more spineless? In the treehouse, no one else dared to answer. Emotio suddenly said, Your Excellency, my Realm Defense Alliance is not charity. At this moment, the woman in red suddenly waved her right hand. Bang! Emotio, who was still speaking, was directly blasted away. 300 m away from the treehouse, Emotio stared at the treehouse in horror, and his eyes were filled with fear. Get lost! At this moment, the voice of the woman in red came from the treehouse. In his original place, Emotio's expression fluctuated. Finally, he coldly glanced at the treehouse, then turned around and disappeared from where he stood. Within the treehouse, the woman in the red dress held Wei Yangtian's hand as she glanced coldly at the crowd. From this moment onward, this girl is the clan leader of the Guwu clan. Do any of you have any objections? The leader of the Guwu clan lowered his head slightly, not daring to speak. At this moment, an ancient Wu clan elder suddenly said, Ancestor, there's something I don't understand. Why should we reject the goodwill of the Realm Defense Alliance? The woman in the red dress pointed at Yi Xian. Do you see him? Yi Xian was stunned. Does it have anything to do with me? The elder glanced at Yi Xian. What does the ancestor mean? The woman in the red dress said indifferently. Can't you see his potential? The elder hesitated, then said, He is indeed monstrous, but the Realm Defense Alliance is strong. It is more advantageous for us, fool. The woman in the red dress suddenly said coldly. Can't you look further? He is only 19 years old now, but he can already kill a true defensive realm expert. Give him another 10 years, no, give him another 5 years. In this world, besides some special old monsters, who can be his match? If we give him another 10 years, no one in the firmament world can be his match. Hearing this, Yi Xian, who was standing next to him, was a little touched. Sir, I didn't know that I was so outstanding in your heart. We had some misunderstandings before. Well, let's get to know each other again. My name is Yi Xian. How should I address you? The woman in the red dress glanced coldly at Yi Xian. Scram. Yi Xian. The woman in the red dress ignored Yi Xian, then looked at the Guwu clan leader, who was still kneeling in front of her. Temporary benefits, but long-term benefits? After me. To what extent has the Guwu clan declined? The Guwu clan leader bowed his head even lower. This junior is useless. I have shamed the ancestors. The woman in the red dress said coldly. From now on, this girl is the Guwu clan leader. Help her well, and you will all benefit in the future. The Guwu clan leader quickly said, Yes, ancestor. The woman in the red dress looked at Yi Xian. Come with me. With that, she walked outside. Wei Yangtian quickly pulled her back, and the woman in the red dress smiled. Come with me. With that, she pulled Wei Yangtian out of the treehouse. Yi Xian hurried to follow him. In the treehouse, everyone looked at each other, not knowing what they were thinking. Outside the treehouse, the woman in the red dress glanced at Yi Xian. She doesn't have any trusted followers in the Guwu clan, and her current strength is low. Even if she stays in the Guwu clan, she may be a mere figurehead and become a puppet. So she needs your help. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, if I get involved, it will only make things more complicated. After all, I'm just an outsider. The woman in the red dress said indifferently. What outsider? You have such a good relationship with this girl, comparable to blood brother and sister. It's only right and proper for you to help her. It's settled. With that, she looked up at the horizon. It's time for me to leave as well. Yi Xian quickly asked. Where are you going, senior? The woman in the red dress said indifferently. I'm going to settle the old scores. Also be careful of the Realm Defense Alliance. They're not simple, so you're on your own. With that, she disappeared on the spot. She left on the spot. Wei Yongtian looked up at the horizon and was about to bow and send her off when a voice suddenly came from the horizon. There's no need to bow. It's enough that the thought is there. Hearing this, Wei Yongtian hesitated but still bowed. A low sigh resounded from afar. Yi Xian pulled Wei Yongtian back to the treehouse. At this moment, all the members of the Wu clan were present. Yi Xian smiled. Patriarch Gu, to be honest, this little girl is a very good seedling. If all of you foster her well, then your Wu clan will definitely prosper in the future. Patriarch Gu glanced at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian looked at Wei Yongtian, and the latter had a nervous expression. Yi Xian smiled. Don't be nervous. I'll be staying here for a few days. A wisp of a smile instantly arose on Wei Yongtian's face when he heard this. In the following period of time, Yi Xian stayed at the Wu clan. Besides accompanying Wei Yongtian every single day, he had another mission, and it was to search for Dao laws. Since the god on the second floor had sensed the aura of a Dao law here, then it proved that there was definitely a Dao law here. Unfortunately, he hadn't found a single strand of it after searching for a few days. During this period, Yi Xian had been paying attention to the Wu clan's attitude towards Wei Yongtian. He noticed that the Wu clan was very respectful towards Wei Yongtian, because the talent she displayed was truly too terrifying. Now, the entire Wu clan treated her like a treasure. Another 2 days passed, but Yi Xian still hadn't found the Dao law, and the god on the second floor hadn't sensed the aura of a Dao law as well. Yi Xian was about to continue his search, but at this moment, the voice transmission stone on him vibrated. It was from Nangong. Something had happened to Shangyu. Nangong had sent news that there was no news from Shangyu on the 4th day, after he entered the 10,000 Beast Mountain range. Upon receiving this news, Yi Xian immediately went to look for Wei Yongtian. You're leaving? Wei Yongtian grabbed Yi Xian's arm tightly. Yi Xian nodded. Something happened to Big Brother's friend. Big Brother has to go take a look. Wei Yongtian lowered her head slightly. Yi Xian was about to speak when Wei Yongtian suddenly let go and said softly, Big Brother, be careful. Yi Xian rubbed Wei Yongtian's little head and smiled. He rubbed Wei Yongtian's little head and said with a smile, Cultivate well here. If you have any problems, send me a voice transmission anytime. Wei Yongtian smiled. All right. Yi Xian nodded and didn't say anything else. He turned around and vanished on his sword. Wei Yongtian looked at the sky and didn't leave for a long time. If a person was helped in their most difficult time, it would be remembered for a lifetime. After Yi Xian left the Wu clan, he headed straight for the 10,000 Beast Mountain range. Meanwhile, Nangong was rushing to the 10,000 Beast Mountain range as well. On the way, Yi Xian's expression was rather solemn. At this moment, he realized that if the Realm Defense Alliance was willing to make friends with these powers, and gave them a certain amount of compensation, these powers basically wouldn't refuse. Just like the Wu clan. If it wasn't for the woman in red, the Wu clan would have sided with the Realm Defense Alliance, because the overall strength of the Realm Defense Alliance was much stronger than the Pale Sword sect. Now that something had happened to Shangyu, the entire 10,000 Beast Mountain range had probably chosen a side. When he thought up to this point, Yi Xian immediately notified the sect. However, he received no response. Even so, Yi Xian still rushed to the 10,000 Beast Mountain range. Actually, the 10,000 Beast Mountain range was separated from humans by the demon race. As for the true strength of the 10,000 Beast Mountain range, it had always been a mystery, just like the Mystic Gate. A day later, Yi Xian arrived at the 10,000 Beast Mountain range on his sword. The entire mountain range stretched for hundreds of thousands of kilometers, and the mountain stretched as far as the eye could see. When he entered the 10,000 Beast Mountain range, Yi Xian saw many warnings, and all of them stated that humans were prohibited from entering. Obviously, this 10,000 Beast Mountain range was not very friendly to humans. Yi Xian sped up and soon arrived at the depths of the mountain range. When he arrived at the entrance of a canyon, a tall middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of him. Law-controlling realm expert. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian. Who are you? Yi Xian cupped his fists. Pale Sword Sect Yi Xian. Yi Xian. Hearing Yi Xian's name, the middle-aged man's eyes narrowed. You're that Yi Xian that the Realm Defense Alliance has issued a warrant for. Yi Xian nodded. The middle-aged man said lightly, What are you doing in my 10,000 Beast Mountain range? Yi Xian said, A few days ago, a disciple of my Pale Sword sect came to pay a visit to the Beast King. But he still hasn't left the mountain range, and there's no news of him. I came here to look for him. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian. He spoke rudely and has been imprisoned by the Beast King. If your Pale Sword sect wants him, then pay 10 billion top-grade spirit stones to ransom him. Yi Xian's face instantly fell when he heard this. Obviously, the 10,000 Beast Mountain range had chosen to stand on the side of the Realm Defense Alliance. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I understand. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Suddenly the middle-aged man said, Stop right there. Yi Xian stopped moving. The middle-aged man spoke coldly. Do you think this is your Pale Sword sect? Do you think you can come and go as you please? Yi Xian said with a smile. Sir, do you want me to stay here too? The middle-aged man smiled. You're right. Will you stay obediently or should I? Right at this moment, Yi Xian turned around and swung his sword. Hiss! The middle-aged man's head flew into the air before he could even react. How dare you? Right at this moment, a furious shout suddenly resounded from the gorge in the distance, and then strands of terrifying pressure suddenly smashed down from the sky. Yi Xian turned around and fled. Chapter 301. After Yi Xian entered a dense forest, his presence disappeared without a trace, as if he had never existed. Not long after Yi Xian disappeared, a bearded man appeared where Yi Xian had been standing. Looking at the corpse on the ground, the bearded man's face darkened. He glanced coldly at the surroundings. Damned human. As soon as his voice fell, he stomped his right foot. Boom! The earth shook violently, as if there was an earthquake. Yi Xian did not leave the Thousand Beast Mountain range, but continued to go deeper in. But the him now was not going in openly but sneaking in. With the chaotic qi, even a true Imperial Law State practitioner would not be able to detect him. About 2 hours later, Yi Xian came to the depths of the Thousand Beast Mountain range. And in the depths of this vast mountain range, there was a city. Thousand Beast City. This city was huge, even bigger than Sky Cloud City. It should be said that this city was the biggest city in the Azure Firmament world. Just the city walls alone were a good few hundred feet high. Standing under the city walls, a person would be as tiny as an ant. But this was normal, because this city was not for humans, but for demonic beasts. Yi Xian sneaked into the city. There were very few buildings in the city, and it was very spacious. In this city, he saw all kinds of demonic beasts, some of them in human form, and some of them still in their original forms. Secretly, Yi Xian was in a dilemma. This city was so huge. If he were to search like this, it would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. Sound transmission stone. Yi Xian thought of the sound transmission stone, but very quickly, he rejected the idea. The demon race would not be so stupid. Since they had imprisoned Shangyu, they would definitely search him for his belongings. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian thought about it, and then went out of the city. In the next moment, a sword suddenly slashed on the walls of the Thousand Beast City. Boom! A corner of the city wall cracked, and the entire Thousand Beast City was shocked. Enemy attack! Countless demonic beasts rushed up the city wall. At the foot of the city walls, Yi Xian stood quietly. The long sword in his hand pointed diagonally at the ground. I am the Blue Sword Sex Yi Xian. I have come here today to seek some guidance from the younger generation of the Thousand Beast City. Under the augmentation of his celestial qi, his voice boomed out like thunder, and half of the Thousand Beast City heard it, challenging the younger generation of the Thousand Beast City. On the city wall, countless demonic beasts roared in unison. Soon, a demonic beast charged towards Yi Xian. Below, Yi Xian was expressionless as he raised his sword and slashed down. Boom! Before the demonic beast could even get close to Yi Xian, it was directly blasted away by the force of Yi Xian's sword strike. Outside the city walls, Yi Xian said coldly, "Too weak. Show me something powerful." On the city walls, another demonic beast charged down. But just like before the demonic beast could even get close to Yi Xian, it was blasted away by the force of Yi Xian's sword strike. Just like that, after more than 10 demonic beasts were blasted away, the demonic beasts on the city walls did not come down anymore. Before the city gates, Yi Xian was expressionless. Why are there no more demonic beasts in the Thousand Beast Mountain range? Right at this moment, the ground suddenly trembled. In next to no time, a violent lion that emanated a dark glow suddenly charged out from within the city. This violent lion was enormous like a hill, and every single time it ran, the ground would tremble violently. When it was still several dozen feet away from Yi Xian, the ground around Yi Xian began to crack inch by inch. Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he charged forward and slashed down with his sword. Boom! Under the gazes of countless people, the wild lion retreated rapidly, and this retreat was no less than 200 feet. And when it stopped, its entire head split open, and blood gushed out like a fountain. This lion was at least at the Dharma-controlling realm, and the strength of its physique was imaginable. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's sword was even sharper. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. The lion stared at Yi Xian, its eyes filled with ferocity. It was about to attack again when a voice suddenly rang out from the city. "Stand down." As the voice fell, a burly man with a curly beard appeared in front of Yi Xian. Dharma-controlling realm. The burly man looked coldly at Yi Xian. "You are Yi Xian?" Yi Xian said indifferently. "That's me." The burly man said coldly. "You want to challenge my demon race?" Yi Xian grinned. "Can't I?" The curly-bearded man nodded. "Yes, of course you can. Since you want a challenge, then my monster race will play with you. Let my monster race see just how strong someone who can make the Realm Defense Alliance suffer a loss is." As his voice fell, he had already appeared on the city wall, and at this moment, a shadow suddenly shot out from the city. The speed of this afterimage was extremely fast. Everywhere it passed, the air would simply rupture, and even space itself would tremble. That was pure physical strength. Yi Xian did not underestimate his opponent. He took a step forward and stabbed down with his sword. One sword to decide life and death. This sword was also imbued with the evil will sword intent. At this moment, a fist landed on the tip of Yi Xian's sword. Boom! An explosion sounded like a clap of thunder. Then the two figures retreated rapidly. Yi Xian retreated a full 30 feet, and 60 feet in front of him stood a man. This man was burly, and his muscles were bulging, filled with explosive strength. The man glanced coldly at Yi Xian, and in the next moment, he stomped his right foot on the ground. The ground beneath Yi Xian's feet instantly cracked, and a wave of energy rushed towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian stabbed his sword into the ground. Boom! Beneath the ground, that wave of energy shattered, and countless gravel flew in all directions. At this time, the man had already appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he punched directly at Yi Xian's head. This punch caused the space in its path to distort. Yi Xian frowned, and in the next moment, he dodged to the side, and at the same time, he twisted his wrist, and the sword in his hand slashed directly at the man's abdomen. Bang! With this slash, Yi Xian felt as if his sword had struck a piece of dark iron, and his entire arm went violently numb. Shit! Yi Xian was shocked in his heart. He tapped his right foot lightly on the ground, and his figure floated backwards. Unfortunately, it was still slightly too late, and the man's fist had already smashed against his chest. Bang! Yi Xian's body arched as he flew over 100 m away. Yi Xian had just stopped when the man suddenly leaped up and arrived above Yi Xian's head, and then he smashed his fist down. It wasn't a martial technique, and it was just pure physical strength. A wisp of a savage smile arose on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth, and then he stomped his right foot on the ground and vanished. A 30m kill. Bang! Along with the sound of an explosion, the man's figure retreated to the spot he stood on, and there was a sword stuck in his fist. The man had just stopped when a sword suddenly slashed out from the sword chest on Yi Xian's back. The sword was like a bolt of lightning. No, it was even faster than lightning. The man hadn't even reacted when the sword pierced through his shoulder, and the formidable force contained within the sword caused the man to retreat explosively over and over again until he reached the side of a wall. I've lost. The curly-bearded man's face instantly sank when he witnessed this scene. Below the wall, Yi Xian gestured with his right hand, and the two swords flew back to him. He raised his head to look at the curly-bearded man and said, "Next. Take the next one." After a moment of silence, countless demon beasts roared furiously from above the wall. These demon beasts glared angrily at Yi Xian, and all of them revealed ferocious gazes, as if they intended to swallow him up. However, no demon beasts descended, nor did they besiege him. This chapter isn't finished. Please continue to the next page. In the demon race, the strong were respected, and a one-on-one battle was a one-on-one battle. The curly-bearded man stared coldly at Yi Xian and said, "As you said." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and looked towards the depths of the city. "Come out." As soon as the curly-bearded man's voice resounded, a figure suddenly shot into the sky from within the city. In the next moment, this figure shot explosively towards Yi Xian. Its speed was so swift that it was comparable to Yi Xian's flying sword from before. Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground, and then a strand of formidable sword aura swept out from within him. The Sword Emperor's aura. This Sword Emperor's aura surged completely into the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Moreover, the sword in his hand had practically instantly turned pitch black. Evil sword intent. Yi Xian stabbed upwards from below. Oem! A sword howl resounded through the sky. Meanwhile, a fist smashed onto the tip of Yi Xian's sword. Bang! The ground beneath Yi Xian's feet collapsed, and the sword in Yi Xian's hand actually started to bend. Right at this moment, a sword suddenly flew out from behind Yi Xian. The man's expression changed drastically in midair, and he hurriedly withdrew his fist before pressing his palms together. This action actually forcefully stopped Yi Xian's sword. But right at this moment, a sword suddenly stabbed into the man's chest. It wasn't deep, and it was only around half an inch deep. Void flash. The surroundings quietened down. On the city wall, the curly-bearded man's expression was extremely gloomy, and no one knew what he was thinking. Below, the man above Yi Xian's head had retreated over 30m away, and then Yi Xian waved his right hand, causing the two swords to fly back to him. The man glanced at Yi Xian. "Your sword is very fast." Yi Xian said, "Your strength is very strong." Physical strength. This man's physical strength was truly formidable. Needless to say, he couldn't underestimate anyone in the world. Even though he already had the ability to kill true Imperial Magic Realm experts, the firmament world was filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Amongst the younger generation, there were many who could similarly kill true Imperial Magic Realm experts. There was always someone stronger in the world. The man glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything else. He bowed deeply to the curly-bearded man on the city wall. "I'm sorry." The curly-bearded man was expressionless. "You should be sorry to yourself." The man fell silent. The curly-bearded man waved his hand. "From today onwards, your cultivation will be doubled." The man smiled bitterly. He didn't say anything else and turned to leave. However, after a few steps, he stopped again and glanced at Yi Xian. "My name is Zhang Yuan. In the future, I will personally go to the Firmament Sword Sect to challenge you." After he finished speaking, he entered the city. Outside the city wall, Yi Xian looked up at the curly-bearded man. "Is there anyone else?" The curly-bearded man stared at Yi Xian. "What exactly do you want to do?" Yi Xian said indifferently. "Previously, a disciple of my Firmament Sword Sect came to the 10,000 Beast Mountain range, but now, there's no news of him. I believe that your demon race must know his whereabouts, right?" The curly-bearded man stared at Yi Xian coldly. "What if I say I don't know?" Yi Xian grinned. He pointed his sword at the curly-bearded man. Come on, continue to call people out. Don't tell me that your demon race has no one in the younger generation. The curly-bearded man stared at Yi Xian. I think you want to die. Yi Xian smiled. Even the Realm Defense Alliance doesn't dare to kill me personally. Do your demon race dare? Why wouldn't I dare? At this moment in the distant city, a voice suddenly sounded. Then, a giant hand suddenly stretched out from the space above Yi Xian's head. The next moment, this giant hand directly fell towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and was about to summon the Prism Pagoda. But at this moment, end of this chapter. Chapter 302. A middle-aged man suddenly appeared before Yi Xian. The middle-aged man looked to be in his 30s, dressed in a gray robe, with a long sword sheathed at his waist. His left hand was behind his back, and his right hand was placed before his chest, holding a black stone in his hand. The middle-aged man glanced at the giant hand above his head, and in the next moment, the sword at his waist suddenly flew out. The skies. Chi. With a tearing sound, the giant hand above Yi Xian's head was split into two. So powerful. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. This man's sword might be the strongest he had seen so far, besides the mysterious woman, although the man had only struck once. But that one strike had given him a feeling. Powerful. Very powerful. The middle-aged man glanced at the Thousand Beast City. When the younger generation can't win, the old ones step in. Don't you think it's embarrassing? As his voice fell, the middle-aged man's left hand pointed lightly. Swoosh. The sword at his waist suddenly flew out, extremely fast, and in an instant, it struck the Thousand Beast City's walls not far away. Chi. The sword fell, and the hundreds of feet tall city wall was slashed to the bottom by the sword, leaving a huge gap in the wall. Insolence. An angry roar suddenly rang out from within the Thousand Beast City. Very soon, a figure suddenly flew out from the depths of the city, and in the next moment, an old man appeared before the middle-aged man. It was an old man. The old man had a pair of long black horns on his head. The old man was about to strike when the middle-aged man suddenly said, "Go back." As his voice fell, his left hand's fingers drew a line in front of him. The sword struck. In the distance, the old man's face changed, and he threw out a punch. Boom! In the air, the space shook violently, and the old man flew out, flying straight back into the Thousand Beast City. The middle-aged man looked coldly at the Thousand Beast City. A bunch of trash. The young won't do, the old won't do. As his voice fell, he suddenly pointed his fingers forward. Boom! In the distance, the gates of the Thousand Beast City crumbled. At that moment, countless powerful exponents suddenly shot up from various parts of the Thousand Beast Mountain Range, and rushed towards the Thousand Beast Mountain Range. All of them were true Imperial Law Realm exponents. In the air, the middle-aged man looked around coldly. Demon Clan, any demons come out to fight? Allow me. Right at this moment, a furious shout suddenly resounded from the north, and then a 300m long WRM flashed through the sky and smashed directly towards the middle-aged man. His powerful physical strength caused the space in his path to distort. The momentum was terrifying. The middle-aged man took a step forward and placed the fingers of his left hand between his eyebrows. A sword quietly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, the sword flew out like a bolt of lightning. As the sword flew out, it grew larger and larger. When it arrived in front of the flood dragon, it was already 1,000 feet long. The middle-aged man suddenly pointed his finger forward. Kill! Boom! In the distance, the flood dragon's body was directly split into two by the sword, and blood poured down from the sky like a waterfall. The air suddenly became quiet. After a moment of silence, over a dozen powerful auras appeared around Yi Xian and the middle-aged man. The weakest was at the true defensive Dharma realm. The middle-aged man was expressionless. The sword in the distance flew back to him and floated there quietly. The middle-aged man swept his eyes around. The older generation of the monster race is just like this. Impudent. At this moment, an angry shout suddenly came from behind the middle-aged man. And at this moment, from the Thousand Beast City in the distance, a voice suddenly rang out. Stop. The voice was like a great bell deafening. Below, Yi Xian trembled and his head felt dizzy. He quickly displayed his sword intent to protect himself. The middle-aged man looked into the distant city. Inside the city, a middle-aged man in a white robe suddenly walked out. The white-robed middle-aged man smiled slightly. Jian Xian, long time no see. Jian Xian. Hearing these two words, the faces of the surrounding monster race experts changed. Practically all the experts of the older generation knew of these two words, because these two words had shaken the entire firmament world all those years ago. Jian Xian. That year, the first in the Azure world's martial roll. The only time the celestial sect did not get the first place was because of this person. In that era, even the peerless genius of the celestial sect was suppressed by Jian Xian of the Azure Sword sect. And Jian Xian was also the person that the Realm Defense Alliance feared the most. In the air, Jian Xian looked coldly at the white-robed middle-aged man. Beast King, let's exchange a few moves? The Beast King shook his head and smiled. If you and I fight, without 10 days and 10 nights, we won't be able to determine the winner. There's no point in fighting. Jian Xian said softly. Then let him go. The Beast King smiled. Jian Xian, be honest. Does your Azure Sword sect really want to fight to the death with the Realm Defense Alliance? Jian Xian was expressionless. It's the Realm Defense Alliance that cannot tolerate my Azure Sword sect, isn't it? The Beast King shook his head and pointed to Yi Xian not far away. The one that the Realm Defense Alliance is really afraid of is this person. If your Azure Sword sect hands him over, won't this matter be over? At least for the time being. Isn't that right? Below, Yi Xian faced the Beast King. Senior, can I say a few words? The Beast King looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile. Of course, why not? Yi Xian smiled and said, if the Realm Defense Alliance has taken a liking to Senior's wife, in order not to anger the Realm Defense Alliance, wouldn't you have to offer your wife to the Realm Defense Alliance with both hands? The Beast King's eyes narrowed, and his right hand slowly clenched. At this time, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Senior Beast King, do you know about dignity and backbone? If we live without dignity and backbone, wouldn't we be worse than a dog? In the air, Jian Xian glanced at Yi Xian and did not say a word. The Beast King laughed lightly. You do have a backbone, to dare to challenge my Thousand Beast City alone. But do you really understand the Realm Defense Alliance? When your Azure Sword sect was at its peak, when your Azure Sword Master was still around, you were not able to destroy the Realm Defense Alliance. What more now? Yi Xian suddenly said. There's nothing in this world that is difficult for those who set their minds to it. As long as I, Yi Xian, do not die sooner or later, I will wipe out the Realm Defense Alliance. To Yi Xian, he and the Realm Defense Alliance were irreconcilable enemies. It did not matter if he could wipe out the Realm Defense Alliance, but he must show it. Anyway, there was nothing to lose even if he boasted. The Beast King gave a thumbs up to Yi Xian. You're amazing, very amazing. Let me wait and see. As he said that, he glanced at Jian Xian and said with a smile. Since you've come out personally, this face must be given. Release him. Following the Beast King's order, Shang Yu was quickly brought out. However, when they saw Shang Yu, Yi Xian and Jian Xian's faces immediately darkened. Because at this moment, Shang Yu's aura was weak. Not only was his aura weak, his dantian was shattered and both his arms were severed. Seeing this scene, Jian Xian turned to look at the Beast King. The Beast King smiled and said, if you want this Yi Xian beside you to stay behind and end up like him, then feel free to make your move. Jian Xian's face was terrifyingly cold, but the Beast King just laughed and turned to leave. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, do it. Hearing that, the Beast King stopped in his tracks. Everyone turned to look at Yi Xian, including Jian Xian, who was also looking at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's right hand gripped the sword in his hand tightly. Eldest uncle, do it. As for me, don't worry. Even the Realm Defense Alliance cannot kill me. What more a demon? Jian Xian looked at Yi Xian. You have the ability to protect yourself? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Jian Xian nodded slightly. He turned to look at the Beast King not far away. You crippled one of my Pale Sword sect's younger generation. I will kill 100 of your demon's younger generation. No, I will wipe out the entire younger generation of your demon race. As his voice fell, he turned into a flash of sword light and rushed into the Thousand Beast City. Seeing this scene, the Beast King's face changed. Insolent. As his voice fell, he rushed towards Jian Xian. But Jian Xian did not fight him. His target was the younger generation of the demon race. At this moment, the Beast King was a little flustered. He seemed to have thought of something and he suddenly roared. Get rid of that Yi Xian. Soon, more than 10 powerful auras from all directions rushed towards Yi Xian. In his original position, Yi Xian was expressionless, not moving nor escaping. P.S. To be honest, during the New Year period, there are not many people who can maintain 3 chapters. For someone so hardworking like me, don't you have anything to say? Just a little something will do. Chapter 303. Yi Xian stood there quietly. Second floor god. Are you going to make a move or not? No. You're really not coming out. I'm not. Fine, we break off our friendship. Break off our friendship then. Unable to get the second floor god to help, Yi Xian had no choice but to take out the Prism Pagoda. Just as he was about to activate the Prism Pagoda, the second floor god suddenly said angrily, Don't activate it. Yi Xian said angrily. If you don't activate it, are you waiting for death? That's right, don't activate it. I'm going to die. You can't activate it even if you die. I don't care. No. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this moment, a voice that Yi Xian had never heard before resounded in the Prism Pagoda. Let him activate it. Hearing this voice, Yi Xian was stunned. Who the hell was this? Which floor was it from? Yi Xian did not have time to think so much, because the pressure from the surrounding experts had arrived. Just as he was about to activate the Prism Pagoda, his body suddenly stiffened. At the same time, he suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were blue. Possessed. At this moment, Yi Xian felt that he was no longer in control of his body, but he could clearly feel everything, including the second floor god. At this moment, the second floor god was very angry. Very angry. Yi Xian coldly glanced around. The next moment, he suddenly stretched out his right hand and pressed down lightly. Boom! The entire sky suddenly shook violently. The next moment, the aura of the demon experts disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian coldly glanced around. At this moment from the north, a huge fist flew across the sky, heading straight for him. Yi Xian bent his right hand into a claw and grabbed the air. Boom! The gigantic fist shattered with a loud bang. Then, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. In the next moment, a heart-wrenching scream resounded from the horizon. A great demon slowly fell from the sky, and Yi Xian actually opened his mouth and ate it. Within his body, Yi Xian's main body vomited. Guru on the second floor, don't King eat that. Use your main body to eat it. Damn, I'm so disgusted. Hurry up and stop. Although it was the Almighty on the second floor who was eating, it was his body. He could clearly feel that feeling. He was King eating them alive. The great god on the second floor didn't even bother about Yi Xian. In just a short while a true tier great demon was eaten alive. At this moment, all the demon clan experts were dumbfounded. When did Yi Xian become so powerful? In the distance, the Beast King in the city also noticed this scene. He looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. How is this possible? At that moment, within the Thousand Beast City, screams and wails rang out incessantly. Hearing this, the Beast King's face changed. He roared in anger. Jian Xian. As his voice fell, he rushed towards the city. At this moment, Jian Xian was in the city slaughtering the younger generation of the demon clan. Not a single one was spared. On the other side, Yi Xian did not stop after eating the great demon alive. Instead, he looked around coldly. Low-level demon beasts. As his voice fell, he rushed towards the right. His speed was extremely fast. It was as if he had teleported thousands of feet away. When he arrived in front of one of the great demons, the latter didn't even have time to react, and was sent flying by his claw. Just as Yi Xian was about to continue attacking, the prison pagoda suddenly shook violently. Yi Xian stopped. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. The great god on the second floor had returned to the pagoda. What's going on? Yi Xian hurriedly asked. The prison pagoda just now had made him a little flustered. After a moment of silence, the great god on the second floor suddenly said angrily, "You idiot!" Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "Can't you speak properly?" The great god on the second floor said angrily. "The seal is about to be lifted." Yi Xian was stunned. Then he hurriedly asked, "Which floor?" "All of them." The great god on the second floor almost roared. "All of them." Yi Xian froze in the air. This prison pagoda had a total of 9 floors. Now only 3 were open. That meant there were 6 more. If all 6 layers of the seal were loosened, then those fellows inside would all come out. Yi Xian didn't dare to think about it, because those imprisoned here were basically not good people, including this great god on the second floor. None of them were good people. In the past, there was the mysterious woman to suppress them. Now who would suppress them? Yi Xian hesitated. Then he said, "Why don't we throw the pagoda away?" The great god on the second floor said coldly, "Can you throw it away?" Yi Xian realized that he really couldn't throw it away. This prison pagoda was almost one with him now. "Wait for that woman to come back," the great god on the second floor suddenly said. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Can we find the Tao Law?" "No," the great god on the second floor said coldly. "You have activated this pagoda time and time again. This pagoda is already seriously injured. Now that it is injured, the importance of the Tao Law has become extremely small. If she doesn't come back in half a year, you can wait for death. 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 Wait for death." Yi Xian hesitated. Then he said, "Great god on the second floor, isn't it good for you to lift the seal?" The second floor was silent. Yi Xian was about to ask. At this time, the great god on the second floor suddenly said angrily, "None of your business." Actually, Yi Xian didn't know what the great god on the second floor was afraid of. She wasn't afraid of this pagoda, nor afraid of those imprisoned in the pagoda. She was afraid of that mysterious woman. She was the first one to wake up, and the only one who had a lot of contact with the mysterious woman. She knew more than Yi Xian how terrifying the mysterious woman was. She was also more aware of Yi Xian's position in the mysterious woman's heart. Those imprisoned in the pagoda didn't know that if anything happened to Yi Xian, that woman would go crazy. And once that woman went crazy, not only would all the imprisoned in the pagoda be finished, even the whole world would be finished. Moreover, most importantly, the mysterious woman had done her a favor. This was also the reason why she didn't like Yi Xian, but still wanted to attack him. Yi Xian also knew that the great god on the second floor didn't like him. So he immediately asked, "Great god on the second floor, is there some misunderstanding between us? I think I'm quite a good person. Why don't you like me?" The great god on the second floor said coldly, "Think about it yourself." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "Think about it, my ass." Ignoring the great god on the second floor, Yi Xian collected his thoughts. At this moment, there were still many great demons of the demon race looking at him. Obviously, those great demons didn't know that the great god on the second floor had returned to the pagoda. In the air, Yi Xian put his hands behind his back, his face expressionless. "Demon race, are there any great demons who want to fight with me?" The demon race experts around him had a look of fear on their faces. No one dared to make a move. Just now, Yi Xian had killed a great demon of the true Imperial Dharma realm in a second. That was an instant kill, and he had eaten it alive. Towards the current Yi Xian, no one was not afraid. In the air, Yi Xian suddenly shouted angrily. Why, is there no one from the demon race? No one actually wants to fight with me? At this moment, the curly-bearded burly man on the city wall appeared in front of Yi Xian. This person was also a demon king of the demon race, and his strength was also at the true imperial Dharma realm. The curly-bearded burly man stared at Yi Xian. You are not Yi Xian. Yi Xian was expressionless. Then who am I? The curly-bearded burly man looked at Yi Xian for a long time, and finally, his right hand slowly clenched. Seeing that the curly-bearded burly man was about to make a move, Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly, and he quickly said, Fine, since you want to chat, then I will chat with you. The main body. Hearing this, the curly-bearded burly man frowned. You really aren't Yi Xian. Yi Xian said. Then do you know who I am? The curly-bearded burly man glanced at Yi Xian. Who the hell are you? Yi Xian smiled, and as if he thought of something, he quickly asked in his heart. Great God on the second floor, how do I address you? The second floor was silent. Yi Xian shook his head, and just as he was about to bluff, the second floor suddenly said, The Lord of the Illusory Demon Realm, Illusory Raccoon. Illusory Demon Realm? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he turned to the curly-bearded burly man not far away. This lord is the lord of the Illusory Demon Realm. Illusory Demon Realm? The curly-bearded burly man frowned deeply. Never heard of it. As he said that, his expression suddenly changed. You are not from the green firmament world. Yi Xian was just about to say something, and at that moment, the cry of a sword suddenly sounded from the Thousand Beast city in the distance. Very quickly, a city wall was cut down by a sword, and it began to crumble inch by inch. The curly-bearded burly man suddenly turned his head, his hands clenched tightly, but he did not dare to make a move. A battle of that level was not something he could participate in. At that moment, within the Thousand Beast city, countless sword lights flashed, and everywhere the sword lights passed, it turned into ruins. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's eyelid twitched. Was the city going to be destroyed? Inside the city, a roar suddenly sounded, and very soon, a destructive power suddenly shot up from the city, straight towards Jian Xian. In the sky, Jian Xian was expressionless, his left hand pointed downwards. Swoosh! A ray of sword light slashed down, and the power was instantly shattered. But Jian Xian did not stop. His left hand slashed diagonally to the right, and a ray of sword light cut across the sky. Swoosh! One side of the city wall was instantly split open, and within the city countless screams rang out. So powerful! Yi Xian was extremely excited. This eldest uncle's battle prowess was terrifying. In the sky above the Thousand Beast city, Jian Xian stood quietly, his left hand pointed, and at the tip of his finger, there was a ray of sword light. Not far from him was the Beast King. At that moment, the Beast King's face was extremely ugly. Extremely ugly. The younger generation of the Thousand Beast city had been almost completely slaughtered. If such a powerful exponent targeted the younger generation, there was no way to stop it, and the person in front of him was not just any ordinary exponent. In the Green Heavens world, there was an unwritten rule that the older generation could not target the younger generation. At that moment, the Beast King was feeling a little regretful, regretting listening to the Realm Defense Alliance and crippling Shangyu. But he really did not think that Jian Xian would come out. And Jian Xian obviously had no intention of stopping. He glanced at Yi Xian not far away. Seeing that Yi Xian was unharmed, he then turned to look at the Beast King not far away. Today, I will destroy your Thousand Beast city. As his voice fell, he was about to strike. But at that moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared not far away from Jian Xian. The man was the Realm Defense Alliance's Supreme Lord Lu. Chapter 304. Realm Guard Alliance Supreme Lord Lu. Supreme Lord Lu glanced at Jian Xian and said, Jian Xian, I never thought that you would come back after disappearing for so many years. Are you here to be buried with the Pale Sword sect? Jian Xian glanced at Supreme Lord Lu. Destroy my Pale Sword sect? Your Realm Guard Alliance? Old Man Lu, there is still the corpse of the previous Supreme Lord hanging at the foot of my Pale Sword Sex Mountain. But don't worry, sooner or later, your corpse will also be hanging there. Supreme Lord Lu was not angry. Is that so? Then let's wait and see. Let's see whether my corpse will be hanging at the foot of your Pale Sword Sex Mountain, or the bodies of everyone in your Pale Sword sect will be hanging at the foot of my Realm Guard Mountain. Jian Xian sheathed his sword. Then let's wait and see. After saying that, he grabbed the unconscious Shang Yu and looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded, and seemed to have thought of something. He looked at the Beast King not far away. Beast King, for the sake of the Realm Guard Alliance, your demon race's younger generation has almost died, and even half of the city has been destroyed. Let me ask you, did you suffer a loss? Haha. After saying that, he turned and flew into the sky on his sword. Soon, Yi Xian and Jian Xian disappeared into the horizon. In the sky above the Thousand Beast City, the Beast King's face was gloomy and grim. Loss. This time it was a loss, and a loss of blood. At this moment, Supreme Lord Lu suddenly said, Beast King, in the future when the Pale Sword sect is destroyed, a third of their assets will belong to your demon race. Hearing this, the Beast King's face eased a little as he looked at Supreme Lord Lu. When will you make your move? Supreme Lord Lu smiled. Soon. Once the matter in Green State is over, we will make our move immediately. The Beast King asked in a low voice. How confident are you? Supreme Lord Lu's mouth curled up. 70 to 80%. The Beast King thought for a moment and said, Jian Xian and Yi Xian aren't simple at all. Especially that young man Yi Xian. He's extremely mysterious. Lord Lu said softly. Don't worry, his confidence comes from that mysterious woman. As for that mysterious woman, someone will deal with her in the future. The Beast King nodded, and did not say anything more. He glanced down at the Thousand Beast City below, and his face darkened once again. This time, the demons had suffered a great loss. When they were about 10 miles away from the Tsang Sword sect, Jian Xian suddenly stopped and handed Shang Yu to Yi Xian. Take him back. Yi Xian was stunned. Eldest martial uncle, you're not going back? Jian Xian glanced in the direction of Azure Sword sect and shook his head. I don't want to go back. As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Xian. If there's nothing else, try not to leave the sect. With that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian shrugged his shoulders and brought Shang Yu back to Azure Sword sect. In the Azure Sword Hall, Chen Beihan looked at Shang Yu for a long time. In the end, he looked at the old man beside him. Is there a way to cure him? The old man walked up to Shang Yu and looked at him carefully before he nodded. His dantian is broken, and he needs spiritual items to recover. The price is not small. Chen Beihan nodded. Cure him at all costs. The old man nodded. Understood. With that, he left the hall with Shang Yu. Chen Beihan looked at Yi Xian. What are your thoughts on this trip? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Our Azure Sword sect is in a bad situation. Chen Beihan smiled. Anything else? Yi Xian shook his head. Nothing else. He turned to Chen Beihan. Sovereign, forgive me for being blunt. Based on the current situation, our Azure Sword sect has no chance of winning. Especially those forces in the Azure Firmament world. Most of them will stand on the Realm Protection Alliance's side. As for us, we have no hope. Chen Beihan smiled. You still haven't looked far enough. Yi Xian said. Sovereign, please enlighten us. Chen Beihan smiled. In the Azure Firmament world, on the surface, the Realm Protection Alliance is the strongest. But below that, there are other strong forces. These forces have deep foundations that even the Realm Protection Alliance fears. For example, the Profound Gate. Yi Xian said in a low voice. They will deal with the Realm Protection Alliance? Chen Beihan smiled. They won't deal with the Realm Defense Alliance. But what the Realm Defense Alliance wants to do will seriously affect their interests. Yi Xian asked. Sovereign, do you know what the Realm Protection Alliance wants to do? Chen Beihan nodded. Do you really think that people like us eat rice for free every day? The Realm Protection Alliance's ambition is not small. He looked at Yi Xian. You need to make a trip back to Azure Province. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Chen Beihan spoke softly. Even though I don't know what their final objective is to stop the Realm Protection Alliance from obtaining the Origin Heart, it's obvious that everything they're doing is for the sake of the Origin Heart. Presently, the territory of Azure Prefecture is in utter chaos, and blood is flowing everywhere. The Origin Heart should be emerging soon, so you have to obtain it first. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Sect Master, I think that you'll have a better chance if you head there yourself. Chen Beihan shook his head. The Realm Protection Alliance will find out at the first possible moment if we leave the Firmament Sword Sect. At that time, the Firmament Sword Sect will probably cease to exist by the time we return. As for you, the Realm Protection Alliance won't be able to notice you at all if you sneak out, right? As he spoke, a spurious smile arose on the corners of his mouth. Obviously, Yi Xian's ability to conceal his aura hadn't been able to fool Chen Beihan. Yi Xian nodded. Then I'll head back. He had been in the Divine Central Continent for some time, and it was indeed time for him to go back and take a look. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian said, Sect Master, I've seen my eldest martial uncle. Chen Beihan said softly, I know. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment then chuckled. Sect Master, did my eldest martial uncle have a melodramatic fight with you over the position of Sect Master? Chen Beihan glanced at Yi Xian and shook his head. It's not what you think. Your eldest martial uncle, this isn't something you should worry about. Previously, I was afraid that the Realm Protection Alliance would target your relatives in Qingzhou, so I sent junior brother Song Xian to Qingzhou to discuss things with him. He isn't someone who holds grudges. Yi Xian's heart warmed when he heard this. He nodded. I understand. With that he bowed slightly and left the hall. Yi Xian didn't return directly to Qingzhou, but made a meal. Inside Cloudsword Hall, Yi Xian put a piece of lean meat in Yu Qi's bowl and grinned. Master, this is delicious. Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian. This time, you went to save Shangyu, and dared to challenge the younger generation of the demon race in Thousand Beast City alone. The senior brothers are very satisfied with you. When you return, there will be a reward. Reward? Yi Xian hurriedly asked. What reward? Yu Qi shook his head. I don't know, but it shouldn't be too bad. She paused for a moment then continued. Did you meet your eldest martial uncle? Yi Xian nodded. I did. Master, does eldest martial uncle have a grudge with the sect master? Yu Qi shook his head slightly. This matter is rather complicated. He should have been the sect master back then, but unfortunately forget it. There's no point in telling you these things. Yi Xian. Moments later, after Yu Qi finished her meal, she flicked her finger and a ray of sword light suddenly entered between Yi Xian's eyebrows. This sword qi was given to me by master, but to me it's useless. You should keep it, it should be of great use. When you return, be careful. With that, she turned and returned to the inner hall. Inside the hall, Yi Xian tidied up and left Cloudsword Hall. He made a table of dishes and sent them to array Dao Peak. Seeing Yi Xian, the lady in the hall glanced at him, but didn't say a word and continued to embroider her things. Yi Xian chuckled. Senior Aunt Gu, I'll be returning to Qingzhou in a while. The lady nodded slightly, but didn't say a word. Yi Xian thought for a moment then grinned. My trip will be a little dangerous. The lady glanced at Yi Xian, but still didn't say a word. Yi Xian was a little helpless. He bowed. Take care, Senior Aunt Gu. With that, he turned and was about to leave. At this moment, a black box suddenly flew in front of him. Yi Xian was overjoyed. He quickly caught the box and turned to the lady. Senior Aunt Gu, this is? The lady said plainly. A temporary sword array, keep it for self-defense. Yi Xian quickly said. Thank you, Senior Aunt Gu. With that, he turned around and disappeared without a trace. In the hall, the lady shook her head slightly, a faint smile on her lips. After Yi Xian left the Cloudy Sword Hall, he went to the weapon crafting peak. Obviously, everyone there knew him. Along the way, the disciples of the weapon crafting peak greeted him as senior brother. Yi Xian also greeted them back. Soon, Yi Xian came to the belly of Weapon Forging Peak and saw Zhan Tai. Yi Xian quickly bowed. "Hello, Senior Aunt Zhan." Zhan Tai said plainly. "What's the matter?" Yi Xian chuckled. "Nothing, I'm just here to see you, Senior Aunt." Zhan Tai was expressionless. "If there's nothing, then go. I'm busy." But Yi Xian did not leave. He just stood there. Zhan Tai looked at Yi Xian. "What's the matter?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. And then he said, "Martial Uncle Zhan, I'll be returning to Azure Prefecture this time, to stop the Realm Defense Alliance from obtaining the origin heart of Azure Prefecture. You're aware of this as well. I'm still so young, and I'm still so weak. Once I return, it will be dangerous." Zhan Tai nodded. "It's quite dangerous. What should we do?" Yi Xian rubbed his hands and smiled. "That, Senior Aunt Zhan, you are the best weapon forging master in Azure Firmament world. You must have many treasures. That, do you have any good equipment that I can lend to Junior Nephew? I promise I will return it." Zhan Tai said plainly. "No, not even a single hair." Yi Xian sighed. "Sigh, forget it. Life and death are decreed by fate. Riches and honor are determined by heaven. Senior Aunt Zhan, I will take my leave." Finishing his words, he turned and walked outside. But Zhan Tai did not have any intention of stopping him. Yi Xian walked very slowly. Very slowly. Half a day passed, and he did not walk out. Just at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. He turned to face Zhan Tai. "Senior Aunt Zhan, once I return, it will be very dangerous. Are you really not going to think about it?" Zhan Tai shook his head and sighed. "How can your skin be so thick?" You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.